Good evening. I'm going to call the City Council workshop for August 14th, 2025 to order. Really, the main thing here, we're talking about some budget stuff, is the first thing is the 2026 budget information, general fund, utility funds, and tax levy. Our Finance Director, Clarissa Hadler,
My clicker doesn't work for my chair, so
Will
the
be.
customer's nice enough to bring me one if this gets long.
perfect.
Okay, well, thank you, Mayor and Council. Obviously, we're here to chat about the 2026 budget. We're gonna go through some objectives for the workshop. So we're gonna learn about our proposed changes to operations and the budget for fiscal year 2026. We're gonna look at how the budget and levy changes, or kind of think about how the budget and levy changes fit with our high level and long-term goals. And then we would really appreciate direction for us as staff to make any revisions that council feels appropriate in preparation for the adoption of the preliminary levy in September. The levy certified in September cannot be increased, but it can be decreased before the final certification in December. I just realized I have to be closer to the microphone, Dustin. I'm not sure this chair's gonna work if I...
We can move the mics too.
All right. So you will recall we had our fabulous strategic planning session back in, what was that, late January, February? And we came up with these core strategies and objectives at that meeting. So there's 6 listed. So we have our normal operations, but then as we're going through our goals and setting up or going through our budget and setting our goals for next year and how to implement those do have definitely an effect on the budget moving forward. So which of them? Most of them. I have them listed here. So we have a lot of planning for development goals. We have a lot of financial strategy goals. Staffing levels and service delivery are sort of an ongoing issue here. And then as well as some facilities planning within that. So our total levy proposed levy for 2026 is $12,205,453. That is over a $2 million increase from last year and a 21% increase. We are projecting the tax rate would go from the 2025 rate of 26.84 up to 31.72. Those are estimates at this point, and that is 4.88 percentage points higher than 2025. So this is my intro to city budgets slide. So just to kind of get an idea of where money comes from and where it goes. So under governmental funds, you can see we have the general fund, debt service funds, and then our capital funds. And we'll get to the right column later. So we're going to start with the governmental funds. Our general fund expenditures are broken up. General government, which is like admin, mayor, planning type stuff, public safety, roughly 50% of our budget. Public Works, roughly a quarter, and then we have some contingency built in. So here's that, essentially that by the numbers. So an overall, overall general fund expenditures of $8,977,154, which is a 12.9% increase over the prior year. So what is driving this increase? Here's kind of a quick rundown. We have some new positions proposed. There are memos in your packet. So 3 fire chiefs, which would be scheduled for half of 2026 and then the full year, 2027. And then 1 additional public works staff member. Salary and benefits is kind of our standard. We assume a 3% COLA as well as steps where appropriate. Some projects for this year. We have an election year, so that every other year that budget swings up and down. We have the 2nd year implementation of our financial software. We have our comprehensive planning process, which is a 3-year process, and it just takes up a lot of our contract services, so engineering and planning, outside planning. And then some facilities planning, so for the fire station, 180 acres, and then some ball field planning. We have some increased engineering costs because we switched from Focus to Bolton and Mink. We are seeing those costs rise. We have the costs of maintaining our new city center. We're getting a better idea of what those costs are and planning for future maintenance. Health insurance, we have tentatively planned for 10%. We did the same thing last year, and it ended up coming in significantly lower. We just want to be safe because we don't know what that looks like year to year. We'll have those numbers in November. And then 2025 is a computer year, 2025. 2026 is a computer year, 2025 was not. So we just have the more hardware costs than we had last year. So this is the breakdown for general government. Again, I kind of reiterated some of the changes in the projects. So 18% change overall, and due to those items that I previously listed. For public safety, we're looking at just over 10%, largely due to the fire captains and some additional paid on-call fire hours, and then just getting our animal control budget where closer to actual. Public Works, our streets department is actually looking at a decrease because we shifted the allocations of some staff members. And then Parks is looking at the increase largely due to those wages. And then there's an additional staff member proposed that would be split across all of those Public Works departments. So again, overall, general fund expenditures of just under 9 million. So that is largely operations. So we do then need to just kind of question how is that funded, right? So we have our revenue, or earned revenue, which is licenses and permits, charges for services, intergovernmental and fines. So licenses and permits, we're highly subsidized by building permits, as well as plan review, which falls under charges and services. And then after that earned revenue, we need to fill the gap, the remaining gap with property taxes. So this is the breakdown of those general fund revenues. You can see that taxes makes up roughly 3/4 of our revenue sources. And then licenses and permits and charges for services, which is again plan reviewed related to building. I want to just point out the intergovernmental section has a decrease of almost 78%. That's because we're shifting some activities away from the general fund into these capital funds. And so it used to be that our MSA dollars were deposited into the general fund. And right now I have them proposed going directly into those project funds. So we have the street maintenance fund, which is a portion of that. And then the infrastructure reserve, which is where we pull the money for those reconstruction projects. So those MSA dollars will go directly into those funds. So then property taxes, you can see up at the very top, increased from 5.6 million up to 6.7 million. So next up, debt service and capital funds. So our debt service increased. We have that new issuance this year. So that added roughly $200,000 to that, increase of almost 7%. And then capital levies, again, this is kind of a new process for us. We just started doing this in 2025. Prior to that, it was, there were a couple of transfers from the general fund or things were getting paid directly out of the general fund, and it was just, we want to steer away from those transfers and the big swings in the general fund expenditures. So we've increased the infrastructure reserve up to $500,000. The city center CIP up to 120. I created a very rough estimation of what our depreciation would be on this building and trying to get that CIP dollar or levy dollar up to that amount, or a portion of that amount. Park CIP is just for future replacement of park facilities. The ballpark fund is for that interfund loan for the new property, the ballpark property that we purchased this year. So that's $250,000 over 10 years. Vehicle and equipment has been in existence for a few years, so we've, again, just kind of getting that up to the level where we're able to replace things with cash. And then the street maintenance is the roughly $600,000. I increased it this year because of inflation, but the estimation created a couple years ago was $600,000 per year in street maintenance. So that is not necessarily what we will spend. That's what we're levying, so that we can levy at a roughly steady amount and spend when we need it. So some of all those that should say capital levies, $2,050,000. So total levy, again, is the sum of the general fund levy, debt levies, and capital levies. So we would like to look at the tax rate and the impact. Again, we're looking at a tax rate of 31.72%. And so the tax impact on a median value home would be a little over $300. So from 1616 up to 1926. Our tax rate, compared to other Washington County cities, we're still fairly low. I tried to draw that little line across there, so we probably move up a few points within the county overall. However, if you look at the cities our size, we'd probably just move one step up, possibly in front of Scandia, obviously, depending on what happens with every other city and their levies and rates and such. These are 2025 numbers, except the green bars that are 2026 proposed. Just a note on tax rates. Tax rates are really just one measurement that we use for comparison. It does not nearly tell the whole story of what is going on with cities. We don't know what their debt levies are. We don't know what their capital levies have been or will be in the future. Some of the reasons that Lake Elmo has been able to maintain a relatively low tax rate is that we have pretty high property values. The tax rate is just a comparison between our tax capacity and our levy. We've been subsidized by development, so a lot of our operations have been funded by our some of our plan reviews and such. And then we have not been levying significantly for future CIP projects. So briefly, we'll touch on the proprietary funds. We do have the long-term financial plan that we do for the utilities each year, so we try to sort of base some of our assumptions on that, as well as look at our expenses in more real time. So kind of mentions the long-term study, assumptions. So the rates is kind of the main thing that, we base our forecasting for the budget on those rates. Those are not adopted until the end of the year, or early next year, actually, possibly. And then one change in process for the capital planning, I'm working on separating the capital revenues and expenses into new funds. So we have the 601, 602, 603 right now. And so we're looking at having capital funds of 611, 612, and 613. So each water, sewer, and storm would have its own capital fund. And so we would put the more capital-related revenues into those and take out the expenses, just to kind of clean it up a little bit, make it a little more obvious where the money's going and coming from. One point about enterprise funds, they use full accrual accounting, so it includes depreciation. The way that we budget in Excel kind of takes into account like some of the bond payments and stuff. It's really not clear. So what you're looking at here is includes depreciation. We're not losing $1.3 million in cash every year. So a little bit of a change. And then, it also takes into account capital purchases. So if we had significantly higher capital purchases last year than this year, then that's going to change our end numbers. So net overall in water of negative $3 million, again, largely due to depreciation.
So
Same thing.
Depreciation wasn't included in 25, but is in 26?
It is included. So under operations, well, you know what? I'd have to verify that, but I believe it was included in that budget. Yeah. It gets a little weird just because these systems that we have set up, I'm hoping this gets a lot better with new software. Thank you, by the way, for again. So this will become a lot easier for us. We're sort of trying to move between systems constantly with these, and this is not an ideal system by any means.
So in this scenario, you have added water treatment at well 2. You say potential for grant reimbursement, but I thought we were okay with the grant reimbursement on that.
Do you know where we're at with the?
We've applied for a 3-year operation and maintenance grant, and we expect it's just a matter of being reviewed by the MPCA. So
We did budget for it, so it's incorporated in the budget.
Budgeted for
Right.
getting the grant.
Right.
Okay, good.
So, and again, this is the preliminary budget. We are gonna be fine tuning this as we go, and as we get more information, this will change between, now and December slightly. Ba, 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 ba. So sewer net, negative 2.4-ish. Storm net, -1. So that's it for the numbers. Our next steps, if we need a follow-up workshop, we could certainly do that. We adopt the preliminary levy in September. The county mails notices in early November. We'll be fine-tuning our budgets between now and December. And then the truth and taxation hearing, we plan to schedule for December 16th, and that would be the time of the final budget and levy adoption. And now, we have time for questions. So our questions really are, where do we go from here? Are there changes in priorities that we need to make? Are there specific questions about expenditures that council has for staff? Should we continue with the proposed levy amounts, or should we change that in some way before that September 16th meeting? And if changes are needed, some very direct, specific direction as far as priorities and strategies that we should revise.
Questions? Councilmember Holtz?
Thank you for all that, because that is a ton. With animal control, can you clarify, bring it up to what the actual cost were? What's happening there?
We budgeted around 14.5, I think, and when we were looking back at the actual last 2 years, in 2025, we budgeted 14.5. But when we actually looked at the last couple of years' actual expenditures, they were higher, closer to like 19 and 24. So we picked sort of a middle ground, happy medium type thing.
You look in the spreadsheet, 23 and 24 were closer to that 22,000. It's just good to add if you have cats, keep track of them, because it costs us like $300 if somebody has to go look for your cat
It's true.
or your dog.
So, because obviously we contract out, we can't predict how many instances we're calling them.
Correct.
They're not necessarily increasing their rates, it's just can't predict the quantity.
Yeah, I don't know about the rates specifically.
And then with COLA at 3%, do we know what other entities are estimating for their COLA if they're choosing to have one?
I don't.
All right. I just asked that as right now it's CPI is about 2.7, but next.
Sure.
Councilmember Hearn?
And I might have missed it, and maybe it's actually in the 2025 budget. Is the RFP revenue factored into, for the firehouse, factored into the revenues at all?
It is. I believe, I would have to look at the line item again. I believe I settled on roughly 150, maybe a little
Okay.
higher for the general fund. And then I assumed, we've been talking, we think it's going to be significantly higher than that. I'm hoping that we can put the balance of it into one of the capital projects, so the city center CIP for future use, being that it's a building that we're selling. I'm hoping we can put it into a building and not, again, subsidize the general fund more than we need to by a sort of, occasional revenue that we can't count on in the future.
Okay. But it's 2026 revenue.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. And I saw the investment earnings up 110%. Is that just because of significantly more money that we're investing? Is that?
Well, it's because I budgeted low. I was trying to budget a little bit more
Got it,
towards
so
the
that-
actuals
Okay.
moving forward. Yeah.
Right.
Councilmember Dragisich?
Difficult budget, but I just don't see that we can increase our tax levy 20%. I think that would be, we would get such beating, we'd have to hide in our basements for a month. We have to find a way to get that, a better number. As I thought about it, I've looked through everything, and I certainly could expound on some potential changes, but I think that's what our staff is for. To look at it and say, where can we reduce in some way that gets us to a more reasonable amount of a tax levy increase? If we put on 20% and school and the county put on something, I mean, we'd see such a huge tax increase that we would all be hiding.
I guess one thing to look at, when I look at this, I did see a large increase, but I also know when we start looking at the depreciated value of things that haven't been accounted for in the past, it gets a little lumpy, right? So, in the past, our city, our residents, taxpayers have been, for lack of a better term, getting off pretty inexpensive relative to the cost for water, sewer, storm sewer, operational costs. And now that we're getting a better handle on what those things cost and actually trying to cover those costs like a business would need to, which is what you need to do. You can't operate in a deficit, and it is oftentimes governments looked at as wanting to remain static. Well, we can't remain static because the price of milk and eggs and everything goes up regularly, gas, vehicle costs. So if there's something to trim, I'm willing to listen to it, but I'm also an advocate of listening to the staff and seeing what they believe is needed for the budgets that they have to take care of the residents and the city assets as a whole.
Remember, the 20% tax increase doesn't include anything for sewer, water, or stormwater. That's a separate item.
It is,
And so, you know, we,
but a lot of that in the past, correct me if I'm wrong, have been somewhat covered by, I don't know, they've been at a negative, right?
yeah, they're not covering their operating expenses. And we talked about that last year. We raised our water rate 20%. We had a plan to 20, which after 5 years got us to where we were, where we need to be. If we get the operational grant for the new plant, that will allow us to not have such big increases, because it'll cover, some of that big increase was due to the new plant projected coming online. We still have, you know, stormwater and sewer to deal with. But I think that, you know, those are somewhat easier to work out. But if we have a 20% increase in our tax levy and 20% increase in our utility rates,
Yeah,
I mean, we're gonna have a
So-
fairly large burden in 1 year on our citizens.
okay. I think though that this workshop's for trying to iron some of those things out, and I'd be interested in hearing what areas that you think we can cut to bring that levy down, and we should talk about those.
Maybe I'll talk on that a little bit too. So I do agree. A 21% increase in the total levy, in my mind, is too much. I agree, obviously. If the numbers were too low in the previous years, like, that can obviously be a part of why it could be a big jump this year. But in my mind, it's too big of a jump. Last year, I took more of the approach of coming into this session with, you know, specific line items
Yeah.
of, you know, these are my suggestions, and reflecting on it. I don't think that was the right way to do it. I think the staff has a better idea of what specific line items could potentially be cut versus what, or could be reduced versus what can't. So in my mind, I think my preference would actually be to say more like, hey, I think we need to cut this number to a 10% increase. And, you know, how we go about that, that's up to staff to bring back to us. And that's just speaking from last year. You know, I brought up a lot of the individual line items, and I understand that, like, it's frustrating, right, if I'm asking about a $10,000 item. You know, my idea last year with doing that was more just to bring to light of, like, hey, like, if we have 100 items that we're paying $10,000 that we don't need for, that's significant. But at the same time, some of those things absolutely were needed. And so, you know, to your question of, like, what specifically should we focus on? I mean, yeah, like, as I was looking through, there were certain things, again, that raised questions for me, but I don't know if me giving those is the right approach. I personally, I'd like to see this come down to the total levy increase of 10%, I think is the max that we should aim for. I mean, again, correct me if I'm wrong, this was before I was on council, but I believe the goal was the 3% increase in the tax rate year over year.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from. I don't recall that exactly, so.
It was brought up, so the first year I was on council, when we were reviewing the budget, that's what was brought up, of why to not keep it the same.
Yeah.
It was the
The-
2% increase is what was,
Yeah, the hard part I have with that is sometimes, as we experience, we're a growing city, right?
Yeah.
And, there's different expectations from the residents revolving around the services that the city gives and how they give it.
yeah.
And sometimes I see companies say, we're gonna hit a 20% profit margin. Well, what's that based off? Well, that's what they wanna do. So if somebody said, let's keep it to a 3% increase, what's that based on? I have no idea.
Sure.
Sometimes it's just an arbitrary number that maybe it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
So I think, you know,
And I was trying to find that Ayler's financial plan. I didn't see anything in there about it.
yeah. So I think when we look at numbers, that, you know, if things don't make sense as far as where the council would like to see the city spending its money, you know, when you're talking cutting that in half, you're looking at over $1 million in cut.
Yeah, it would be about
Something
a little,
like that.
just a little over $1 million.
Yeah, so it's not small.
It's not a small ask.
It's not a small ask, it's not a small budget item.
But it's also not a small ask for, you know, $1 million for the taxpayers.
You could cut down some of the capital, pockets that you're putting money into. Maybe slowly increase those as opposed to starting out at a large number, I don't know.
That is a slow increase compared to what we need, actually.
Yeah, right, right, because you end
How
up,
long- this
you end
will
up
be-
at the end of the day, big ticket item comes up and then you have to bond for it and then you're adding to your debt, correct?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm open to listening and, yeah, if we think staff needs to put a sharper pencil to the paper, we can ask that. But I think what I heard, Director Hadler ask is, if we have, you know, maybe it's not specific line items, Councilmember Hearn,
Yeah.
but maybe it's areas, right?
Yeah.
You know, one of the large items, not to pick on chief, but, you know, for running a fire department and you have 24-hour shifts, you know, the 3 captains, it's not a small number, but if you wanna run your fire department for the city at that level, and then that's kind of what it takes to run it from a staff level, and that does increase. Right, I mean, it's only half the year next year, it'll be the whole year in 27, so keep that in mind.
Just some thoughts that I had looking at it, you know, this one's a little more painful there, but if we reduce some of these levies, let's say the infrastructure levy, we go to, you know, 350,000, because we did add the franchise fees of 250 to that. So that would give 600,000 there. I think concurrently, we can reduce some of our capital CIP expenditures to bring that more in line as well. Maybe we can reduce the CIP levy from 120 to 100. And, you know, just kind of looking at those different types, the park CIP levy, we have a new levy, we have 100,000 in there. I guess we're just
We're
holding
also
that.
putting some of the
Franchise fee, like
in there, so-
250,000 in there.
Is that accounted for franchise fee in there, Director Handler?
Well, there really isn't any expenditures coming out of the park CIP right now, so I didn't really create a budget for it per se.
But,
It just kind
but
of parks the-
ideally, we have a ballpark number that we'll be getting in the franchise fee to support both infrastructure and parks,
The
right?
franchise fees are included in the infrastructure reserve budget. They
Okay.
will, but again, these are all kind of new processes.
Right.
And for this particular meeting, I didn't do
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot for that, but you will recall from our CIP discussion that we have these reports out of our CIP planning software Planet, where we can kind of pencil in what these revenue amounts were gonna be. And so we have that sort of roughly planned out. And we'll kind of revisit that later in
Yeah.
the year, but,
I
Yes.
could hear that discussion on if those franchise fees would allow us to cut back on some of the capital levies for those areas?
I've already worked the franchise fees
Into it.
into the modeling that we have for the CIP. Obviously, everything changes if we change, you know, what we're spending on our capital projects. So
Okay.
everything is essentially good for about 5 minutes until we change something, and then we have to redo it or whatever,
Okay.
but, yeah.
But I think those are the things we look at. What can we do with the CIP? Like, what can we do with the CIP to get this down to something more manageable? I think that, you know, the ongoing maintenance, things like, you know, the street maintenance levy and that are important. That saves us some long-term money. I think, you know, our infrastructure reserve, we're gonna have to maybe creep a little slower than we're anticipating to get there and combine that with a little less spending to make that, make some sense. And maybe, you know, with the franchise fee going in, part of that going to parks, maybe we can, you know, hold back on the park levy a little bit. But I'm trying to make some suggestions, but we have a staff that's very talented, that knows everything a little bit better than we do. I agree with the chief. It's, you know, we need to staff our fire department as public safety. You know, you don't want your loved one laying on the floor and not having enough staff to get there. We live, you know, we exist for health, safety, and welfare of our residents. So we have to take a look at those kinds of things and prioritize them. But I think we gotta get this down to a little more manageable number. That's just the thoughts of one crazy council person.
Well, and I agree. I think the capital expenses is a good place to start. Councilmember Holtz, you brought up the COLA. I guess I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that. I think that's an area, I mean, we do have the rate increases factored in. I think that's an area to look.
Well,
I do think that, oh,
sorry.
it's all right. It's one of the questions tonight, obviously, with the three captains for the fire department. That's obviously a pretty large expense that could factor into getting towards that decrease of a 10% total levy versus a 21% increase. You know, I don't know how it factors in. I want to be careful. You know, the summers, right? The Fridays off in the summers. You know, what happens if we get rid of that, and does that mean we don't need to hire as much staff as a result of that because there's more hours that are being worked? I don't know how those hours are accounted for during the summer.
Everybody still works 40 hours, it's just shifted.
Just
So
they
it's-
shift
It's
it.
4 nines and a
Okay.
4.
Perfect.
Everybody still works
Yep.
40 hours.
And so this, I mean, but I think this is, I guess that's my point, is you guys understand that side of it better, and you're gonna know where to find these areas that can be decreased, although it may be difficult and it may be hard, and it would be maybe necessary, and if it is necessary, then okay, then I guess, you know, then bring that back and say so. But as of right now, I didn't
want to.
can't go along with it until I see it get
Yeah,
lower.
I didn't want to bring up the captains were just an example of that's a large increase that I think is important for the city and the residents to have that. So those are the kind of numbers that increased the total levy, right? So it's just trying to find if there's any fat to cut off the meat, really, in that. And so I didn't mean to put the chief in an uncomfortable position, because I talked to him about it earlier so I could better understand how the captains correlated and integrated with the department overall.
One of the thoughts I have with all this is, if our levy rate was 28% this past year, and the prior year was 27 prior year, because we had a history previously of 10, 15 years ago of actually planning and doing depreciation and knowing our long-term cost, the change would be, I think, what many are asking for, a manageable change. So on one side of the coin, it is a substantial increase. I don't like it. The other side of the coin is that the cost? If that's the cost, that is the cost. I mean, you mentioned it. If we have to invest a certain amount of dollars into our capital funds to actually save money in the long term by maintaining properly, yeah, there is a front-end harm to that. And I don't want to necessarily bring up what has happened in years past, because it doesn't matter at this point. But that also impacts then how we see it. We're seeing it as a jump of several points that I remember those conversations, but I still remember it was Christina who brought it up, right?
Yeah, yep.
And I can never recall, was it
Well, and there are a
2%
couple-
or 2 points? And part of her calculation also presumed a certain rate of tax capacity growth, which was a shot in the dark. Because you can't predict, but yeah, I fully remember those as well, because
Yeah.
that was what we were trained on when we started as well. We were
Yeah.
trained, but the final, we never saw the final details. The tax capacity growth piques my interest, because we're seeing the tax capacity, the amount of increase slow, because we know the economy is slowing. Whether or not we have a recession in the next year or two is a realistic conversation. And so I'm very hesitant when we, and this is the way it's always been for years now, a decade plus, our building inspections, the permit area, that's a source of revenue that's going to continue to slow. It might slow more than you're even projecting. And I know you're conservative with it to begin with, but my underlying point there is tax capacity, the amount of increase is going to continue to slow, which affects that underlying formula from 10 years ago of we're going to do 2 points every year. I can't go down that road. I fully concur. There's a strong desire to find those areas. Chief, sorry, this is the easiest one. But I think that's also a prime example to say, we're looking through it, like there are multiple ones where it's a change here, a change there. An additional employee for Public Works that we all know is necessary. It's absolutely necessary, and it costs money. The captains are absolutely necessary, and it costs money. So at the end of the day, if the costs are the costs, yes. If there are things here and there that you're able to see in the lines that we're not necessarily seeing, yes, absolutely, let's find those things. In looking at it, I don't see those. But yeah, we all support finding if there's something here, something there. Yes, absolutely. I don't know if I support trimming a couple levies here and there, because it's a shot in the dark. Let's do 20,000 there, 20,000 there, when it's not necessarily based upon the future modeling. You already indicated we're not investing as much as would be helpful to begin with for some of our long-term.
For our capital needs?
Yes.
Actually, I ran some numbers earlier today. We have our documents for the audit that show what we have for assets and what we have for depreciation. So I rounded like a lot. But we have roughly $20 million in buildings. So if every building lasts 50 years, that's $400,000 a year. We're levying 120 just right now, right? That's the proposed. We have improvements other than buildings at $4 million, machinery and equipment at $10 million. So if the average piece of machinery and equipment lasts 10 years, that's $1 million per year. We're at 450. We have infrastructure. This is just general fund, not water and sewer. Infrastructure of $100 million. So if all of our infrastructure averages 50 years, it's $2 million per year, and I'm proposing 500,000, right? And so this is now, we have 25 million in assets we've already depreciated. So we've already spent that asset, and we have a couple $1 million in the bank reserved for CIP stuff, right?
Yeah.
So this is that. I think we did just a little bit of a comparison for the utility funds. We were looking at like, what is our cash relative to our depreciation? And it's very, very low. And so we're trying to do kind of the same thing here with the general fund, is like, how much cash do we have versus how much we've already depreciated? And this is just, just a really rough gauge of, where are we sitting with cash versus needs long-term?
So what happens next year? Do we have to increase it by this much again next year to get even closer to what we're gonna need to do to match this amount of depreciation value?
Yeah, in the CIP plan, I have penciled in what those increases look like to get us up to an amount where we're actually setting aside enough. The goal being that we're not taking out debt, you know.
That's setting aside
that- and
enough
that's-
for our current assets, the depreciation of our current assets is what you're saying? Or are you saying for?
Attempting to get to a point, at some point in the next 20 years, of setting aside enough. We are well behind. This process should have been done 20 years ago when the city started to develop, right? And so, you know, we're significantly behind where we should be today, and the more we put it off, the worse future Lake Elmo,
The bigger that delta
So
gets.
right?
That change from 2025 to 2026 with the capital expenses and how much we're spending, is there gonna be another jump like that? Is that significant of a jump next year?
Absolutely. If you want to, this is again, this is a policy decision.
Policy.
My job is to just do the math and try and get us in a position where this city is sustainable long-term. That's all this is. So your policy decision is how aggressive do we want to be? Is the money gonna come from somewhere else? So hence the franchise fees discussion,
Or the other end of it is
kick the
decrease
can.
the capital improvement plan budget as well?
Correct, obvious, absolutely an option.
And so I think, again, I mean, I know that kind of leads into the next one, the next item on the agenda, but I still do feel like the largest area that we could cut back is the capital expenses as a result of relooking at the CIP and knowing and working backwards, right?
Sure.
If we can, if we want to budget X dollars into the capital expenses, well, what can our CIP total amount be over the next 10 years then?
Sure. I would just point out that the CIP is essentially we call it a longer-term plan, but it's only 10 years, right? We're looking at roads that are, how long does a road last, Jack? 50 years, 100 years?
I wish.
So we're looking at.
Portions of the road are redone in 25, not the whole road.
Right. So when we're talking about our capital decreasing our capital expenses, you're talking about decreasing that capital expense in the next 10 years, but the revenue that we're trying to set aside is long-term. It's only a portion, by the way, so we're trying to decrease the amount of debt. I still have, I don't recall exactly, but my debt projections where we might have half the amount of debt that we have if we set aside something like 30% with cash, pay for 30% of our projects with cash, we'll be at half in 20 years.
And that wasn't
So that's-
decreasing expenses.
Right. But and again, it's this, like, we're trying to build, we have the tax revenues as set-asides, but it's not really the instant win that you think that it's gonna be necessarily, if that makes sense.
No,
So
it-
again, we're way off between capital and
Yeah.
depreciation.
It does, and I
So-
think it's the right call that we're being proactive with trying to increase the revenues to get there.
Yeah,
But the issue is oftentimes as revenues increase, you just spend more. And so we need to be looking at that side of it as well. I mean, that's budgeting. It's a tough thing, right? Somebody gets a pay raise, what's the first thing you want to do?
Yep.
You want to spend more of it. And if we're trying to decrease the debt, well, yeah, let's bring in more revenue, but let's spend less. And I know that's obviously challenging with a growing city, but there has to be some sort of move in that direction.
Remember, the growth in the city for a lot of the infrastructure isn't paid for by the city. It's paid for by developers.
And then
What we're
it's,
spending money on is rehabilitating
Rehabilitating.
existing infrastructure. But I don't think, when we look at it, I don't think 5 million a year in streets is sustainable, unless we're just going to continue to raise taxes 20% every year, which I don't think our citizens are going to, accept.
if I remember correctly, the expense, and Jack, you can correct me if I'm not remembering this right, but there's an expenditure for roadways that gets us to a point where we are primarily only doing rehabilitation as opposed to any full reconstruct or heavier types of fixes. And that capital expenditure does go down after like 4 years or something like
That's
that.
like, how many, 40 years?
After 4, sorry.
Well, not in the CIP we currently have.
I thought
We're spending 50 million on streets over 10 years.
I think, Mayor,
Is
I
that
think
right?
it was after the 2035 point with what
Yeah.
you're
Oh, was
talking
it
about.
after
It was after
2035?
that.
Okay.
But
It's
I could be
near,
wrong.
it's on the, it's not on the 50 side, yeah, it was within the next 5 to 10, yes.
Okay.
well, what happens if, can we still get to that same point in 20 years versus 10 years? Or is it, you have to be that aggressive with it in 10 years to get to the point where
Probably
we're
not.
just
Again,
rehabbing it?
it's just how you want, you can make that more gradual, sure.
And I think maybe that would be the approach then is, okay, well, let's work in that direction. Let's go there more gradually. You know, this is usually like more my style is rip off the Band-Aid and go. But from the taxpayer's perspective, I don't know if that's the right way to go.
That's an interesting analogy. Because and you said it too, Mayor, for years, we have not been paying for the costs. And I don't think, no one did it intentionally, but we also have qualified staff in place throughout the enterprise right now who are telling us these are the costs. Is that ripping off the Band-Aid? I also agree, at this next conversation, maybe it's more of a transition, but as an example, maybe it means there's not a parks shade shelter every year in a row for multiple years. Maybe it's one every 10 years, because that's literally what can be afforded. And that's one example. And I love those things, and people have been asking for them.
Well,
But
maybe you can't, like you said, you can't do them as quickly as maybe projected, so.
what I do appreciate is that we're having this conversation on a very hard topic. And it's actually, to me, this has probably been one of our better budget conversations in recent years. Because we're all in agreement. It's how do we get there? And I'm very glad we have competent staff in place to inform us on the behind-the-scenes things that not one of us can do. So I appreciate that.
So, it sounds like council's asking to come back workshop in September and asking to see if we can't, what it would take to bring down the levy. And if it can't, then the reasons why and the explanation thereof, I guess. Is that, did I encapsulate that?
Yeah, and again, I don't want it to feel like I'm just putting this on staff to come with those specific items. I just think that they're gonna know it best, so, you know, I think it could be challenging for the staff to come back and have to say specifically why, unless they wanna go through every single item.
Well, there's a lot of things in here that I recognize, like, you know, cause, and I talked with Director Hadler this afternoon. You know, you look at the IT support, and if you look at that in the line items, it's in every department, right? It's parceled out. And I said, well, seems like it's a lot. What's the total of that? And some of the areas you'll see it decreased a little bit because then it's increased a lot more than somewhere else. But we spend about
$142, I think.
$142,000 a year on IT support for the city, for all the departments, the computers, the software, you know, things like that, to keep that up to date. So, some of those things, that's the
Yeah.
cost, right?
And that's, that's actually one I had highlighted is, you know, when I was thinking, all right, let's go through this line by line. Why is this $14,000 more for this department?
Yeah, and then when-
$10 more for
yeah,
this
But
department?
it all balanced up to that total of 142
Yeah.
that we pay Metro INET.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
What are council's thoughts on the COLA? And the reason I ask that is because the largest contract in the state is gonna be doing a COLA, almost half of that. So,
You're talking about ASME?
yep, MAPE,
Oh, man.
it's at 175.
I guess we could look at the, you know, cause beyond the COLA, there are step increases for annual. But we could look at what was the index you brought up?
There's two different CPIs. There's overall CPI, which right now for the year is at 2.7, and then core CPI is at 3.1. So,
Okay.
but core CPI excludes certain things. Overall CPI is at 2.7. Because we do have the bumps in there as well. If you earn it, you get it. I guess then it's the question of the COLA. I don't support zero. Costs are increasing. But is there a drastic savings by matching it to CPI? It's not gonna change significantly, but I think it's a worthwhile conversation.
Yeah,
I think it's-
take a look at it.
Yeah, I think it's worth taking a look at. Again, maybe I don't know how it was factored in when the steps were determined with the rate increases. Was the COLA factored into that? Was it not
No.
factored into it?
That's not factored in.
So I think that's a conversation worth having. It's tough, but
And each step can vary within the grid. Are our steps like 5% differentials between the bumps?
3%.
They are 3%, oh yeah.
Just a little bit of information from HR group that our HR coordinator attended. The COLAs they were talking about in that group were 3 to 4.5%. That's just in one group of city officials.
in addition to the step annual,
They were just talking about COLA.
I think sometimes we do just, or at least, I don't know, over the past 30 years of my career, it's just that 3% number has always been just kind of thrown out like a nickel, right? It's like, there's 3%. Well, I guess it's worth taking a look at, but.
how do is the step, it's a 3% increase every year? Or is it based off of a promotion?
It's based on years of service and meeting, if you have a performance plan, right?
Yeah.
Meeting your performance for the year that your supervisor believes that you go on to the next level. It should be a merit increase,
And
right?
how often could those steps be earned?
They're once a year, except for when you're first hired, it's 6 months,
6 months, yeah.
and then it's every year after
So we're
that.
talking a 6% increase between COLA and step.
No, they're different percentages, right? So it's not straight 6.
Or you're saying like it'd be like,
It actually ends up being like 6 points. something.
Point something, right?
It's 3% of that, and now 3% of the new number.
New number.
got it. Okay. So, not quite 6%, but
Yeah.
4 to 5% increase annually.
No, over 6.
Over 6%.
Okay, so
Yeah.
over 6%.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what I was trying to ask is, with that example of, if the, instead of steps, it's the annual increase is based off of 3 to 4% COLA, I think that's different than if it's both occurring.
We do have a compensation plan, and we could look and see what that is, but that's what guides us as well for, which the council reapproves every year, which has the steps. So I don't have it pulled up in front of me right now, but perhaps that sheds some light on this as well.
Yeah, so maybe it'd be a good conversation.
I can find it, but I did send council another email, and I attached that, actually,
Yeah.
recently,
Okay.
so.
Well, and the hard part with that, as we saw this past week, our grids, even with our comparison studies recently, our grids are still oftentimes less than many neighbors, depending upon which comparable city we do. So I am not in favor of saying either a COLA or a step increase. We can't do that if we're gonna continue to attract and maintain quality staff. But I just brought up the 3% just because that is above CPI. Clear as mud?
Clear as mud. I don't know if you want to speak to this at all, but I think I speak for everyone if if I say that staff would actually appreciate more direction with regard to certain priorities that should take higher priority than others. We essentially base our budgets on the direction from council. These are estimates, it's just a budget, we'll have a finer tune, better numbers later in the year. And actual may not be what we're budgeting. But, my idea for cutting something might be different than somebody else's. Some budgets have more room. My budget doesn't have a ton of room other than, so if you said cut your budget, everybody cut your budget 10%, mine's coming straight out of training. That's just like, I just don't have other spots to take it from, right? And so when we're given this sort of broad scope, it gets a little tricky, because if I'm cutting my training budget and another department is not, then it becomes this, sort of equity issue across the board and such. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, again, if we focus on the capital expenses though, in looking at the CIP items, reducing those, reducing the capital expenses, if we can get the majority of the decrease from that.
So I'll say this, related to training, is that, I think the council's made it, fair standard that we do want our employees to do the training, to stay up to date with the new things, and we feel like that's important. So, and given what Councilmember Hearn said, is it, we know that these are large round numbers, and sometimes we're, being conservative with those numbers, to be safe, right? I get that. Animal control, for example. I mean, you gotta put in a number, right? Could be 19,000 next year, we put in 22. Maybe we, but again, I don't wanna talk about $1,000 here, $1,000 there. That's not the point of a budget, in my opinion. So maybe this is a good transition then, since it is, 7:30, we've gone over this, we've brought up our comments, to go into the 2026 to 2035 CIP and go through that. Would that be?
One of those, just, if you look at specific lines, and I'm not picking anybody, I scroll down quickly in the line item budget. So in the finance department, $50,000 increase for a long-range financial plan. Is that an area where maybe we could delay that for a year or do that differently? Or
We're gonna have a discussion about that. That is an excellent point. Thank you.
I mean, I just kind of, your budget's near the top of the line, that one jumped out
Yep.
quickly. I'm not saying for or against, but those are kind of things the department looks at and says, what do we absolutely need in 2026 to function effectively or to provide, the services we need? And we could go through line by line and do that, but we don't really know, enough detail to say I would hesitate just to cut something out of a department just because I think it's crazy.
I was just gonna add, and Clarissa was on the same page as me. Perhaps, if we're looking at our operating expenses, in the beginning of her slides, she had that the majority of your short-term goals are what is included staff moving forward on in 2026. So of course, I always carry around our strategic plan, which has our short-term goals. So that would be probably, if you want to get into that, helpful for us to go through them and like, which one do you want to slow down on? And we can look at that. I mean, it's not going to be big, not like the capital expenses, not bigger chunks, but we do need a little bit more direction because we are taking forward your goals and trying to make all your dreams come true.
Why does the cable franchise revenue basically get cut in half? Like, I see what it says, extra reimbursement in 24, 25, not expecting 26. What was the extra reimbursement in 24, 25?
So I'll try to cover this, but maybe you can help me. The cable commission, after they did their audit, they had some additional funds and they did a one-time disbursement throughout the cities. And when I talked to them, they said, don't count on that again.
Gotcha.
So,
And it'll probably stay that way.
yeah, she said actually, not surprising, people are not using cable as much. And so the expected revenue, she said, for cities should be planning a decrease each year.
Where are we at in terms of, because there's revenue for permits and inspections that's then used to pay for salary for permits and inspections, and there was some legal aspects to that to make sure they're aligned. Where are we at in terms of cost versus revenue for that area? Are we raising amount that's pretty dang close to what we're spending, or is there the ability to, because I know we approved months ago the fee schedule, but in terms of the cost versus the revenue, are they closer aligned now than they were in the past? Several years ago, they were not close, and cities were warned and they were threatened with lawsuits.
Yeah, we got some letter from the building,
Some
Minnesota Building Group, right? Whatever they're called.
to say you can't have these be so out of alignment. You
Yeah.
need to basically only collect what you're gonna spend.
I guess I don't have that off the top of my head. We do fill out a fee report to the state. I could get you a copy of that via email later if you'd like.
Just as an opportunity, because it's not, we're not in a position where we're laying off inspectors or laying off people in that area. But if we are presuming there's a decrease in new permits, but we still have other activities we need to continue to do, does that mean we need to make sure the revenue is still coming in other ways for that department, as an example?
Sure.
I do know that a number of cities have been sued in the last 6 months on those permit fees,
Yeah,
Because they're collecting too much.
collecting too much, yeah.
yeah.
I don't want that.
With the goals, just so I understand what you were asking there, so you were saying, look at the goal, the first slide, I think
Yeah.
it was, where it had the goals listed.
Yep.
Could you pull that slide up again, actually, please?
Yeah, it's not,
And
oops, wrong computer.
her slide didn't have the actual
Didn't- it
goals.
just had the
Yeah, it's not
numbers
the
on
actual
it.
But-
goals.
But I have
Oh, I thought
them,
it did have one.
or we can.
As the numbers.
We can pull it
Has
up
the
too.
numbers of the goals.
Maybe it'll still be helpful, just as I look through it.
Yeah, we can.
So the number goals, so look through and say, hey, of these 15 goals, which ones do we want to prioritize?
Yeah,
Which
that-
ones are maybe lower on the priority list for next year or the next couple of years?
2, 5, and 10.
And again, I'm happy to do that. I'm very,
Charged in our costs last.
from last year, I mean, I came with over 100 single line items, and that did not go well. Mostly because they weren't the right ones. It didn't make sense, and I wouldn't know. So I'm not going down that road again. I think it makes more sense to look at, hey, like, you know, for the taxpayers, a 20% increase in the total levy, 21% is gonna be very hard to swallow. We need to get that down. How we get there, I think that's gonna have to come from the staff. And going through line by line, so I think this is gonna be helpful. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
I
We-
don't think
We can
going
pull
line
up
by line is gonna
our
work, though.
goals, you know, we have a list of them in our, we can access it and display it.
Yeah, or
So-
if, like, for
or-
time purposes, I can just send that after, or if we wanna do it now,
I mean, I could pull it up and you can continue having the discussion on the next item, and if you have time, if you wanna revisit it, it'll be there.
okay,
Is that okay?
yeah.
Okay. All right, let's move into the CIP.
So we didn't prepare a presentation or anything. This is a request from Councilmember Zdrojicic and her to revisit the discussion that we had on July 9th. Does that sound right? So we essentially just sort of
Sounds
gave you a
about
link
right.
to the packet. So we're happy to answer any questions.
Let me pull that up. Ooh, hey.
clear, sir, are you able to pull up the July 8th presentation from the CIP, just so they have?
Was it the 9th or 8th?
She has it linked here,
Presentation.
Oh, I can go in that way. All right.
July 8th.
but then it comes up as
That was
a
one day
page,
off.
and word search does not work. Doesn't it pull up the shade?
Sure, is there a particular slide or discussion that we would like to have on this?
Nick, we want to lead it off?
No.
No? I mean, I can try. You'll probably say it more elegant than me. Well, I'll start it off. I mean, yeah, I get, we've kind of had the conversation with the last item here. Again, I think looking at the levy for this year, knowing, and for me, feeling like that's too large of an increase. Again, I was reflecting on last year, and I'm looking at these $1,000, $500, $1,000 line items. And I still think it's important to not be spending $1,000 when we don't need to be spending that $1,000. And especially if that's happening over and over again, it makes a big difference. But I think we needed to look at the bigger projects, and this is where obviously the bigger spend is coming. This is going into those capital expenses. I think working backwards might be a better way of going about this of, okay, if Councilmember Dragisich, you know, was helping me understand from this standpoint too, as far as like, I think it's 50% or $5 million a year that we're putting towards roads. And again, to the conversation we had with the levy, where yes, if we could get to that point where instead of having to be doing these large reconstructions, it's more the maintenance side of it. And I want to get there, and I think that's really good that we're being proactive about getting there. I think maybe we need to get there slower. I think we need to say, okay, well, what are, again, using the projections, knowing where we want to get to. You mentioned that, hey, if we're increasing these revenues, that we can get it down to a $35 million debt load in the next 10 years. 20 million, better
Nope,
yet, right?
20 years.
20 years, okay. Well, great, let's still increase the revenues, but let's also decrease the expenses. And this is so, I know this is challenging to decrease expenses, again, right? I was just looking at my personal budget a week ago, and you want to spend every dollar you have, right? And it's really challenging to cut anything. Despite, hey, knowing that 10 years ago I lived on that, and it's fine, right? And it's challenging though, but I do think we need to look at these capital expenses. I think the roads is probably the biggest one that I think needs to come down on an annual basis, which, yes, they still need to happen, but I think we need to probably look at cutting that in half, $2.5 million to roads per year versus $5 million. And I'm sure there's other areas as well throughout the CIP, but again, just trying to, instead of picking the smallest items and a bunch of them, well, okay, if that's really challenging to do, then well, what's the biggest thing that's costing us money, and what can we do with that expense to make the biggest impact right away? And that's where with roads, that's where I'm kind of going with that, and that's why I want to bring it up. I wish I would have brought it up during the first discussion. I did have it written down in my notes even, I just didn't bring it up of, what is the number that we want to get to? Let's work backwards from there. This number is too high for the CIP for 10 years. Let's bring that number down. And then let's figure out what we need to do from that. Prioritize, which is hard. It's going to mean there's certain things that we may need that we're going to still get, but maybe we can't get them right away.
Question, and I agree with pretty much all of that. I should know the answer, but now I'm questioning myself. Say park items that were listed in the CIP, these aren't coming from the general fund, they're coming from the parks fund. Say, the shade structures, that's coming from the park fund,
Park dedication, correct.
which the levy itself of the 31% levy is not affecting.
Not the park dedication. So park dedication comes from development. We have started levying for park replacement with the assumption that park dedication funds will end in the future and we will not be able to
Yeah.
meet our replacement needs.
Wait,
So
okay.
certainly that would be one of the, kind of one of the quick fixes to decrease the levy is to just get rid of that secondary park CIP. Now, that again, I'm looking out 20 and 30 years for some of this stuff, and so some of this stuff will be a little bit more clear when we do get to that long-term planning stuff, but absolutely.
Yeah, so I was confirming for some reason I just had a pause there, but because it really is then, I'll stop that thought.
Well, and I think it goes back to, again, right, like, yeah, if there's areas that we can cut, parks, it's 5 million over the next 10 years, but the public works is 55 million, by far the most. The water, that's not gonna be 61 million, some of that's gonna be covered ideally by the 3M,
Most all of it.
most all of it, right? So although it's on this chart showing that it's the second highest, public works is over 50%. I think that's where we focus then, right? That's where, and the roads seem to be a place that we can potentially do that. Yes, that might mean a road has to make it 2 more years and maybe not the greatest condition. But I think that's the balance we have to have. I'd love to have perfect roads for every single road, but it's just, we have to balance that with, well, what's the cost of it? And, you know, it's tough, but
Well, that 55 million, about 30 million is tax levy. For either debt or direct spending. And so it's a big number. I just think that we have to, I'm with you, I think we have to take a look, how can we tame that down just a little and not do significant harm, but on the other hand, try and keep our tax levies to something manageable. And I'm not opposed to raising the levy, but I just don't think we can go the amount we're talking about.
We had a discussion a month ago or so where it came up where there was a possibility where some things were coming from the levy when it could potentially come from utility funds. And you were calling it out and you were surprised. Do you remember what that example
That
was?
Well, the
This is-
stormwater, we had a portion of stormwater being funded by levy rather than the stormwater fund.
Right, and the sewer was being funded by the sewer fund on the Hudson Boulevard, right? That was the discrepancy?
Yeah. And so looking at those projects, and maybe there's some additional funding could come from our enterprise funds, you know, understanding that the people who pay utility fees are not the same people who pay property taxes, because we have exempts that, you know, pay those fees. And to the extent that we subsidize with property taxes, we put a bigger burden on our property taxpayers.
And in all transparency, I understand it's shifting from one place to the other. It doesn't actually decrease a cost, but at least to try to make sure that it is originating in the correct place. Councilmember Hearn, I don't disagree. The hard part is over the last couple of years, the roads and the investment in the software and trying to get us back on track has probably been, to me, the biggest improvement the council's been able to make for the city. So I very much have it pains me to slow down on that. On the flip side, if a majority says that's what's gonna happen, that's what's gonna happen, I understand why. But we also know full well we're not even investing the amount necessary right now.
Manning.
Jack has something.
Yes, sir.
If I'd like to just talk a couple of minutes here about the CIP and the history of where we've been, and it feels like we're coming a little bit full circle from my tenure here. But, you know, the county comes out with a CIP like this every year, and right in the beginning, the first thing they say is, the only projects that matter is the first year, those are the only projects that they've identified they're moving forward with. Everything else is a planning tool. So everything beyond 2026 is a planning tool, and next year we'll come up with a revised CIP, and some of these projects will be off the list, and some of the projects, or they'll be moved around based on what we're seeing out there. So it's a moving target, it's a planning tool. And so then it becomes more, because of the planning tool, it becomes more of an art than a science of what you're doing. We just recently went to a 10-year CIP, and especially when it comes to the streets, projecting out 10 years of what project, you know, when Councilmember Hearn says, you know, maybe we can drag it out 2 years. Absolutely, we're not gonna come forward and, you know, when we get within 2 years of a project coming out and we're looking at it and it's gonna give 2 more years, in that year of the recycle, it's gonna get backed off. There might be some project that's deteriorated faster that has to move forward, but there'll be a project that you push out because it's not needed. So, and when I presented this when I presented this before, the first 3 to 5 years are, if you look on the ratings, they're roads that are in need of reconstruction right now, not, and
And
some of
those are
roads-
street improvement projects.
some of those street improvement projects, they're in need right now, and they're not being addressed for another 5 years. But you get beyond year 6 and 7, and I put projects on this list based on age of pavement and when the road was built. If you go out there and look at the condition of it, it doesn't look like it needs to be redone right now, and maybe it won't need to be redone in the year I programmed it. Alls I did was look at the year it was built and the age of that pavement and projected, you know, because we wanted to do a 10-year planning document, it was like, well, that road likely will be one we're looking pretty closely at that point in time. But as we get closer, will we need to do it at that point in time? Will it have deteriorated, or will we, you know, so it becomes very much of an art like that. So can we push, especially those later year projects, out or off the list for now? Certainly, there's projections like that. The other thing we've got in there, we have we have $8 million in just 3 projects that are collector roads that could be done by developers. If development comes into the Fifth Street area, that could get paid for by development or partially by development or something like that, and we got.
That's something in the next few years?
Yeah, I put it at 2030,
Oh, 2030.
$4.6 million to build a portion
2031.
of Fifth Street. If development comes in before 2030, the developer will have to pay 100% of that cost. I put it in there in 2030 because that's when that area opens up as a planning thing, and if
Yeah.
nothing's happened by 2030, it's likely because developers aren't gonna stomach that cost
Sure.
of that portion of the road, and the city might need to build that road to jumpstart
Sure.
development in that area. So there's a lot of guessing going
Yeah.
on of, you know, like I said, there's $8 million in road projects and just 3 projects that based on past practice, will get built by developers, and you won't see any of that cost. But it's hard to leave it
Yeah.
off the list.
Sure.
When you want a 10-year CIP and you want a planning document, because you want to understand, you don't want to miss it, and then suddenly you do need to do it, and, well, why wasn't that on the list? Why weren't we
Yeah.
identifying that?
And I think that is the challenge, right? And
Yep.
I guess, like you mentioned, this is not set in stone, these are gonna change. So one, my first inclination would be, well, then let's go the opposite way with it. Let's not put it on there, and then if we need it, then we can do it.
I think,
Well, the future stuff isn't impacting the current tax levy, so really what you wanna look at is 2026, and even if,
Yeah.
like I said, in the street projects, like if you take, what's on the list, what's that, Heights of Lake Elmo?
Lake Elmo Heights.
Yeah, I mean, those roads are
Next year.
absolutely destroyed, right? So you look at 2.7, 2.9, 3.3, and then it drops back down to
Yeah.
2, right? So as we get to a place where the roads are in better condition, we take, I mean, there's a couple roads off, what is that, 38th and 39th off of Jamica. Those are in horrible condition.
Yeah.
If you wanna look at something that might be able to get pushed in discussion would be this south frontage road, Keats to Lake Elmo Avenue.
So I think, I mean, that's the discussion that I think needs to happen. And I said it poorly with those future ones. Maybe another way to say it is, I think if we're planning for those numbers, it's more likely that we move forward with that versus if we're planning for something less and then it comes in higher, we're gonna look a little bit more stringently at it versus if it's already there, it's like, all right, we're ready to spend that. And
Yeah, as I'm listening to this conversation over the course of this year, it's been a couple of them, I almost, it's like I want to keep two sets of books, because I don't want to lose
Yeah.
sight of projects that we might have to do.
Yeah.
But when you're translating into a long-term financial plan, there's maybe not 100% of these projects are 100% going to be needed at the time they are, so.
It's almost like when compiling the totals, because we do have a priority name for that, it's future consideration. It's priority 5. It's almost as if when all the numbers are being compiled, it's like, here's the price tag for priorities 1 and 2. Here's the price tag for priorities 3 and 4. Over here is what you're talking about, the placeholders, the ones that,
yeah,
They're 5s.
yeah.
The county projects are a classic example where we know the county's talking about those projects, they're
Yeah.
programming their stuff, but we have
Everything
no
down
idea.
here.
If you go back 2 years, you'll find the Manning project that just started construction, we had 500,000 in there. Our cost share turned out to be $2,500,
Yeah.
not 500,000. We have no idea what the cost share is gonna be because we don't even know what the scope of the work is.
What is the Manning and Hudson stoplight? Can you remind me of that?
That's if that could be paid, Hudson and Manning
developer.
is if Limerick comes in. So if
That-
Limerick comes
okay.
in,
they move
that'll
Hudson.
get funded by Limerick.
So that's $300,000 in 2026.
Yeah.
That might not happen,
Yeah.
right?
And I mean, that's probably where the conversation go here is like, well, okay, well, what about next year? And, back to your point, maybe if you could just elaborate on a little bit as far as like, okay, some of these roads that are getting done in 2 to 3 years, that, like you mentioned, hey, they're ready now, they're scheduled 3 years out. Well, what happens if it's 4 years?
Right, and if it's already needs to be reconstructed, it just higher costs in the next year based on construction costs going up.
And like, so the increase of
Increase of
material,
construction
labor,
costs.
increase of costs.
But there's some
okay.
projects, as you know, we try to do a lower cost reclaim. And sometimes if the road deteriorates to a point where a reclaim is viable now, but if you wait 5 more years, it's no longer viable, and now you're doing a reconstruct, which is 3 times the cost.
Yeah.
So there are certain improvements you want to tackle within the right time frame, or they escalate really
back at
quickly
that.
in more cost.
'Cause what was the total for 2026? It was for roads.
6.7.
So I get, again, you're gonna have a much better idea of which road needs it versus which doesn't. I'm trying to balance both sides of it, right? Like, from your perspective, you're thinking obviously the financials too, so I wanna be careful about that, but
Well, I would need to
If I could
understand
find
how
a
the
way.
whole 10 years is playing into the
well, I'm just thinking just next year.
rate this year.
Well, what can we do next year in the year 2026, 2027, maybe 2028 with those road projects that are scheduled out in the next 3 years? How can we actually make that happen over 5 years?
You just tell us to do them over 5 years, and we do them over 5 years, and as residents complain, what your added cost is gonna be pothole repair, public works staff. Sometimes they're patching roads and the patches get bigger, so there is some expense, it's not
Sure,
horrendous, but it's,
okay.
there's some,
I guess,
there's
I
some
mean, I'm
lost
open
costs.
to hearing other thoughts on that too. I guess that's just,
But the next 3 to 4 years are all, if you look, they're all in the pavement ratings, they're all failed roads, they all need, the recommendation is to reconstruct them. There was one other point I wanted to talk about when I mentioned full circle, because when I came here, what happened was a financial number was cited of how much we can do in capital improvements per year. And that's kind of what the city had been doing every year. There was a limit, it was, 10 million total projects. If there was a 2 million fire truck and a backhoe or, dump truck or something like that, a plow, you'd back all that out and this is what you got left for roads or whatever.
Sure.
And for years, most of my tenure here, we backed into that number and we just did what we could with the amount that we were given. We overdid it that way because we fell behind quite a bit.
Sure.
And so it was kind of this council and the mayor's coming on board and stuff. It's like, we can't just keep backing into this. We need to find out what do we need and so that was part of the pavement management plan, which was mostly maintenance and keeping up on the maintenance and not forgetting that.
Was that number changing?
I remember specifically one council member, or one council meeting during budget, watching it with my popcorn and my beer on a Tuesday night. They went through all the
You
items.
were not on council at the
I
time.
was not on council, it was quite a few years ago, actually. And they went through and they got all the line items done, and they said, well, how much do we have left for roadways? And they said, Jack, what can you do for $400,000? Well, we'll figure it out. And that's literally, that is like, in my opinion, the worst way to plan for your infrastructure. And I think Director Handler mentioned something about the assets of the city and the infrastructure being 100 million. I wouldn't be surprised if it's higher than that. I don't know if you use GASI 34 modified method or straight line method. I'm guessing straight line. But it's a financial way to figure out what your investment is in your city relative to your infrastructure. It takes lengths of miles, includes curb and gutter, catch basins, manholes, inlets, all that stuff, right? So, I mean, there's some, like, when I look at this, there's probably $1.3 million next year. I mean, I've driven on Hudson, the south frontage road between Keats and Lake quite a few times, just because I want to go see if that grass has started over there by the water tower or whatever, but, you know, that's something that could probably get pushed. It's not in very good condition, but it's not.
We're trying, and if you go back previous years, you'll see that that's been programmed earlier, and
Yeah.
we have pushed that a couple years.
Yeah.
We keep pushing it, because the longer we can push it and get away with pushing it, the more likely, if
get a
Valley High
developer.
comes in and redevelops, that gets done by a developer.
Yeah.
But there's gonna come a point where we can't push it anymore.
Right, yeah, so then it becomes our cost.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say is the path that we've been on has pushed us into $60 million outstanding debt, and a debt levy each year to property taxes. 35% of our levy goes just to pay principal and interest on bonds. That's just not sustainable. If we keep down that path, $3.5 million goes just to pay, we have $5 million to operate the city and $3.5 million to pay principal and interest on debt.
I'm not gonna argue with you on
I
that.
mean, that just doesn't seem to make sense.
So to highlight where we're at, because we're talking about streets, in this case, which we do have a specific levy, if we're talking about South Frontage Road, Keats to Lake Elmo, which is programmed for $1 million in 2026, and we don't know if it's happening or not, that would be coming from the road levy or from the general levy?
It would be coming from the infrastructure fund, but largely actually bond proceeds. So we still, depending on, now, again, long-term planning, more discussion to come. But there's this, you know, how do we get from A to B? So my formula that I've kind of worked into the CIP planning is that we're trying to spend 30% of our total projects with cash. And then we supplement, sorry, let me clarify. Depending on the type of project, it's a percentage of cash. Some of it I was able to do sort of straight off 30%. Some of them where we're working up to 30% over the next 10 years. And so I had to make some assumptions. But because we don't have a lot of cash on hand, the assumption is we're going to continue to take out debt until we have that fund built up, and are able to, you know, to move away from that.
So
more.
bond with some cash.
So
and-
the biggest impact that I think that moving that project back a year would be just lowering that
$300,000.
future debt, that new
Yeah,
future debt,
right.
right?
And 300 of cash.
Yeah.
Which project were you?
The
South
Hudson
Frontage Road.
Keats
Just
to
as
Lake
an
Elmo.
example.
So that's likely to be paid by grant. Right now, as it stands, MnDOT's coming in to pay for that.
Oh, that's what that
Oh.
is. I misread that,
So,
sorry.
so those two
On
projects, those
36.
two $500,000 together, 2.5 is the 5 million contribution.
Yep, that's
They're looking
right.
for us to trunk highway
Right,
36.
so this is gonna be done
Oh,
by
yeah.
MinDOT.
I mean, there is a city contribution, they're
yeah.
expecting a large city contribution toward that.
Well,
interchange.
I'll
we've
give a
got
dollar.
5 million, no, 4 million in the CIP for CASA 17 as our cost share, right?
Yeah, and it's been 5 million from the beginning, and now the South Frontage Road is part of it, so we're still paying the amount, but we're almost getting a big road improvement added in there since that all happened.
Oh, yeah. I was looking at it and thinking it was referring to what you were just talking
I
about with
was
Hudson.
on the wrong frontage road, my mistake, sorry.
But as an example, the 300 for the stoplight Manning and Hudson, like, no, if Limerick does it, great, but we don't need to be,
We just don't know when it gets done, if there's the county will, either Limerick will lead that, or Limerick will provide cash to the county, and the county will do it, and they'll charge the city something.
Right.
So there's a budget in there for the city, it could be that thing where it turns out to be $2,500, I don't know.
Yeah,
But so, there's a project we're aware of, it's ready to go if Limerick goes, and we don't know what our cost share is. Anything in the green is highly speculative in terms of the dollar amounts.
in which case, because again, no matter which fund it comes from, or if it's bond and then there's a portion of cash, there's still, no matter what, could be
Yeah,
some
114,
impact to our final levy rate. It's gonna vary depending on what the type of project is.
I would suggest the stuff in the orange, the Hudson Boulevards and the Fifth Street just come out. I mean, the other thing the city could do with Fifth Street, if you have to do it, is you could move that project forward and assess it 100% to those neighboring, those properties
Yep.
and force development. I mean,
429 it.
yeah, you can do, you have the powers to do it that way and do it differently.
Many others
That-
do.
That 4.6 and Hudson Boulevard ones are ones that could essentially come out of the financial plan if that's if that's partly wrecking havoc. But I don't want to lose sight of those projects being on the
right,
horizon.
you wanna keep track of them. I get it.
So either way, there are many possibilities here for things that obviously are in the 2026, where depending upon how it plays out, we may already have set our levy, but we're gonna end up spending less, but the levy and what we collect is already coming
Once
in.
that's set, it's set.
Yeah. Because that's the hard part. Some of these things may not happen, but we've already set the levy.
Well, except for it's not a direct payment. So we have an infrastructure fund, which we are planning to pay for a portion of future road projects, right? So think of your $500,000 next year could pay for $100,000 for the next 5 years or something. It's not like this 500 is gonna go for this project. And then the assumption is, because we don't have cash, that we would be taking out debt. And so that debt wouldn't affect the 26 levy, that would actually affect the 27
Yeah.
and beyond levy. So it's not you're not getting a 1-for-1. It's not at all,
It's not immediate impact.
correct.
So the predictions that we have, our debt service levy and our infrastructure levy in 2025 was 3.3 million. In 2032, it's projected to be 5.9 million. We're gonna double if we keep on the path that we're on.
What are you looking at?
In the CIP, we have our debt service levy and our infrastructure levy.
What page are you on?
I'm on the 2026 to 2035 capital improvement plan.
Yeah,
We're near the end, I don't know what page it is, let's see, it's page,
doesn't say page number.
A170.
Letter thing is throwing me off. Yours just has numbers.
Yeah.
The page does it.
There we go.
So if you look in 2025, we have $3.3 million and levy and,
So I gotta go
and
another
debt service and infrastructure.
20.
And you go out to 2033 and you got 6.1.
11.
Sorry, can I come look at your computer?
Yeah, just make sure you guys are looking at the same thing.
Yeah. So it's almost double.
You're talking 25 to 32. I go from 3 point something to almost, you're talking about the debt service levy or the
Both,
infrastructure
the
levy?
combined debt service and infrastructure
Oh,
levy.
sure.
The
Yeah.
debt service levy is the biggest portion of it. So you go from 2025 to 2033, and it pretty much doubles.
Over 8 years, yep. Before it starts to go down in 2034.
Yeah.
I would just reiterate, the reason that that is because we did not
Well-
have capital levies in the past.
It dips down, but if you go out, when you get to,
Yeah,
then it goes back up, gets over $7 and a half, $8 million actually.
you're still talking theoretical when you get out to that point, in my opinion.
Right.
It's a best guess.
It's the best guess. But you know, we talked
But you're
about
also talking about probably having, I don't know, what's our road miles in Lake Elmo now? 110,
99.
99? And what was it 10 years ago?
It was still like 70 or something.
Yeah, so that's probably projecting out in those years where you have more lane miles of road in developed areas, you're gonna have to take care of more, even if developers build it, you still have to maintain it, right? So some of that increase is gonna be based on just having more
This is
to take care
construction,
of.
this is maintenance, this is, we have another
Yeah,
600,000
so you're
in
even gonna,
maintenance.
so
to add
you're
on to this
still,
levy.
so then when you get out to 2040, you're looking at roads that you're doing full depth reclamation on roads that you did in 2020, right?
When we get to say that the Savona roads built in 2013, so you get to 2033, that 2033 to 2038, so that
Yeah.
25-year period, you're not gonna be rebuilding that curb and gutter, you're not gonna be replacing the base, you're not gonna be replacing the drain tile, you're gonna come in and you're gonna do a low-cost, either mill and overlay or a reclaim.
Right.
So for many, many years, then those new roads are going to, you're not rebuilding those and replacing those full roadways. You're just replacing the top for another 25 years.
So I see what you're saying, Councilmember Dragisich, is that increases, but the increase isn't just as, you can't think of that as it is, as things are stated as they are currently. That has to account for increased amount of roadways that that the city will have to take care of, right?
Understand, but I'm just saying, the property tax impacts are gonna be, in my view, our citizens won't stand for those level of impact increases.
Well, I'm also not sure, I would question whether or not the numbers include basically a leveling out of, the tax base number. If that was also increased along with that, is like, how many households are paying into that tax, or has that been also increased and stratified by year?
That would come more in the long-term planning
Yeah.
process.
So,
So if
I mean, I can't answer that question, so.
I mean, the intriguing part because we saw this data before, but then the intriguing part is the debt service levy for that portion basically is remaining between 3 and 4 million for
Yeah.
a 20-year span. It's the infrastructure levy,
Yeah,
because we'll continue to be adding infrastructure.
But take the infrastructure every way, and you're gonna have to fund it with debt and pay interest.
Correct.
We're still spending the money.
Yep. Yeah, Because like in 2040, our population will be between 18 and 20,000. So there's additional households there, there's additional roadways, there's additional costs. We don't know what the tax capacity, we don't know how many businesses will be in here. All right, so the
Do we know-
proposal is what?
Do we know what the total CIP is for 2026? I'm trying,
Sure I do.
25 million?
Let me see
That
if
sound
it's
right? No, that's just water.
handy. Those are charts. Hold on. It's 34 million, but that includes the water treatment plant of 24. So roughly
10 million.
So 10 million.
I mean, I guess, so my thought on this is, I guess it's kind of like a similar to what we've mentioned with the levy is, again, I guess we could go through this line by line and say what I think from the capital improvement plan that maybe needs to get cut. I don't know if that's the right way to do it. I think, I guess it's interesting that you guys have had an issue with that in the past, where, you know, you kind of have hey, this is the limit. And I get that, but I feel like we have a lot more, we have the pavement plan in place here, where we're able to make sure we're looking at this and make a shift if we see, okay, hey, 10 million for CIP isn't enough this year, we need to increase that limit to 12 million this year. I don't know if that flexibility was there in the previous councils when they had that backstop limit where it was 10 million and it stayed that way for 10 years and it never changed. I don't know, but.
Again, I'll read, the street rating and pavement management plan is programming out your maintenance dollars.
Yeah.
So that's that 600,000 maintenance dollars.
Correct.
And that's making sure you stay on top of that to extend the life of the pavements. That's trying to work toward your goal of not doing these major
The
improvements
backstop was for the
quicker.
budget, or was it for the CIP?
Budget.
I'm sorry, I thought before you were talking about the backstop for the CIP.
Yeah, and so then for the CIP, as I've mentioned, I can tell you the first 5 years in your CIP right now, from an engineering perspective, all need to be reconstructed today, even though we're not doing them, we're doing them over the next 5 years, but they all need to be done today.
I guess again, my question is, well, what happens if we do it over 7 years? What if we do it over
Yep.
8 years? I know that means
You just
there's
fall-
some
you
maintenance
just fall
costs
behind
that are
and don't get
additional,
it. Right, you just keep,
and so I.
becomes that balance that you
Yeah.
said.
So I guess that's my ask as one council member is, I'd like to see, as we look at the CIP, in general, that number come down. Again, if you want me to give a number, I think it should come down closer to probably 25% from what we're looking at in 2026. And then I think in general, over the next 10 years, even though it is, like you said, an art and there is a lot of fluctuation to those, I'd rather err on the side of it being too low and having to make a decision the year before that we need to increase that CIP as we get closer to it, rather than the opposite. I'm concerned that if we keep it at the higher limit, that it's gonna be easy in future years to say, well, maybe we need a little bit more. It's just gonna bump up from there. I don't see it coming down by any means. So that's my feeling on it with the CIP. I would like to see that number come down. I think it's gonna be the opposite end or it's gonna be the other part of the equation of getting to that 20 million, or to 30 million of debt in the next 20 years, is instead of just increasing revenues, we have to slow down the increase of expenses. I think that's a big piece of it, and I think that needs to be a portion of it, and I think the easiest way to go, the most efficient way to go about that is looking at these capital improvement projects and decreasing that. Because again, I don't think going through the budget line by line is gonna, it's the sand, right? These are the rocks. This is gonna it's gonna move the needle more for us. And so I think focusing on this and the CIP is gonna help a lot with, so we don't have to ask for 500,000 for the capital expenses in the levy. We can drop that to 300,000. For the parks, so we don't have to have $100,000 levied for parks, we can levy 50,000. And so we can maybe still get there in 20 years, but it's because we're working from both ends.
So essentially, Cliff Note, your suggestion would be, you know, of our 600 that is set aside for road maintenance, reduce it by X amount,
Not maintenance.
not the maintenance, so only for the capital improvement side. in
Correct.
Which most of that is debt,
Yep,
and some is cash. All right.
most of it is debt. I think the other thing to remember is that, you know, our newer developments where people bought homes, the cost of all those improvements were included in their lot. And so the streets, whatever you have, right, they paid for in their lot. The improvements now, and that's where the bulk of the value is in the community, in the new developments. The improvements now, 70% are paid by a tax levy. And so the people who bought new homes are paid for theirs in their lot, and they're paying for everybody else's in their tax levy at a higher rate because the homes are higher valued.
That's just the circle there. I mean, we could exactly talk about that in the development that I moved into or you moved into, right? I've been paying for other people's roads in my tax levy while my road turned into Street Baghdad until it was reconditioned a year ago. And it was severely under maintenance. It didn't get chip sealed. It didn't get what it needed. Could have probably, well, it didn't, you didn't have the, you didn't have some of the drainage appurtenances in there to make it last that long, so, but it could have lasted longer if it would have been maintained appropriately.
I'm not talking about the maintenance side, I'm
No,
talking about
I'm
construction.
telling you
Yeah.
that when I moved in that house, my streets were great. And so when you're doing an infrastructure levy and you're paying for all these other roads to get done, that, I was paying part of that, even though my road was great. That's just part of being society. That's part of being a community.
It is, I understand that, but when we're talking about raising the levy 20%, and then, you know, and a good piece of that, 30% is going to fix streets. It seems somewhat disproportionate.
Have you gone out and looked at the streets that are in the 2026?
not,
All right,
no.
well, I would ask you to go do that.
Maybe we need to raise the assessment levy to cut down on the amount being tax levied. Go from 30% to 50%.
In the start of my career, assessments were closer to 75-80% was the average city. They were assessing like that.
Yep.
In my opinion, it's the fact that you have to prove out the assessments through appraisal values.
Yep.
That's the part of the process that's broken.
Yep.
And cities found, the reason everybody dropped significantly, and many cities went to no assessments at all, the reason they did that is because they were spending way too much money on every project, doing appraisals. I mean, the appraisals, if you have to do 10, 12 appraisals, they're 15, 20 grand a piece. They're more than the feasibility studies. They become very high cost, and you were spending more time fighting those off. So that's when if you poll the cities now, you're seeing them all around the 30% or 25% assessment rates. But that's why it happened, but they were much higher when I started my career.
So would your idea have the next 5 years be done in 7? Would
I
that
mean, I
be-
think that's, again, I want to, it's more asking staff to come back with that may be the idea. Again, I don't know if that's feasible, and I'm kind of asking the same thing for the budget is, I'm not comfortable with this number. I'm comfortable with half, 10% increase for the levy. I think I'm comfortable with maybe 7.5 million for 2026 instead of 10 million for CIP. I think I'm more comfortable with maybe like half as much being spent on roads. I don't know which specific items to take out.
Yeah, well, and I think engineering is telling us they want a policy decision. If we want to say,
So I guess
take 5 years and do it over 7, he then figures out what there's gonna be, but they want a policy decision.
yeah, one, I think, I don't know if this is a policy decision, but I just think from the financial perspective, if anything, that would be the policy of like, this is how much is available to spend. And if that means doing it over 7 years, what we had planned for the next 5, fantastic. If it can be done over 8, great. I don't know what that looks like, but I think we do need to decrease that number. And there needs to be some, and maybe it can't be 25% decrease in 2026, and maybe it can't be a half as much or spreading what we have planned for the next 5 years over 7 years for roads, but we need to at least move in that direction.
Well, so here's a policy idea. To overwork staff, maybe suggestion 1, what would be the impact to the levy if the next 5 years of CIP roads were done over 7? Option 2, is it possible to somehow decrease it, you said 25% for road?
For 2026,
for CIP
and it doesn't
roads?
have to be from roads, but again, if we're looking at, well, what's the biggest chunk of it?
Yep.
Okay, that's a large chunk, so I think roads is a place that we can look. I want to be very mindful of, there's been a lot of great work done with the pavement, and that's why I feel a little more comfortable doing this as well, is because we have the pavement index. We have this plan where we're
We do.
reviewing constantly, and we're using to make these decisions, where that wasn't happening
We
10
do.
years ago, and it's easier to fall behind when we're not constantly seeing those numbers.
I mean, the hard part for me is that index is telling us these roads suck and they need to be replaced now. That's entirely true, we have that. But I think, yeah, they can come back when we do our next workshop. If 5 years and 7, what does that look like? And if it looks great, great. We're gonna be warned. Jack isn't gonna tell us, here's the consequences and the risks. One of the roads might
Correct.
turn into a full reclaim.
We have, $600,000 in park play equipment to be
I think-
redone next year. So do you straddle those out, maybe do 2 instead of 3?
I mean,
To
And
reduce
stretch
the-
that out over
this is
3,
a
4
conversation
years?
for at the Parks meeting. That's a big item that I'm gonna bring up. I don't know if we spend that at all. I think we have to look at, what's getting used. This is the discussion for that, but I think that is an area that could potentially
When
be lowered, but I get nervous about going line item by line item again.
I mean, for my value, I mean, I've used the pup park. I don't know that it, that's $50,000 of paving. You know, a new park pavilion at $80,000 for the next 5 years. Do you do one every other year? Maybe that's something you look at.
So I think there's a lot of items like that, and that's a perfect example of, yes, it would be very nice to have, but
Yeah.
our city is still gonna survive and thrive without that. And so this is where, hey, maybe the roads isn't the right place to focus, but we need to do in my perspective, something needs to happen to decrease these numbers.
Sure.
I would
I
be
think you
fine
can play
asking-
around with any of them, really. It's just where you wanna, where it kinda makes sense for the short term and the long term of the city, and you gotta make that balance, right? So,
And I don't know, I mean, is that something that we need to decide right now? I mean, obviously, the CIP gets brought back. I think my thought, again, is if we give staff direction of 10 million is too much, 7.5 million is more on track. We have this initial CIP, we're gonna be able to contrast it with a CIP at 7.5 million. It can be highlighted what was taken out, and then then if it's like, ouch, that really hurts that we don't have those items.
so what we also ask then is when we start looking at fleet and stuff, do you do it every, the recommended years? Stretch out another 1, 2 years or whatever? So then you get into some of the swag stuff, right, where you're saying, well, I'll put that many more miles on it, and our maintenance will go up a little bit, but we won't have to get but then the new vehicle, 3 years later, is gonna be X amount more, right? So I don't even know if you're gonna catch up with that number. Or even when you delay some of the construction stuff, I don't know if you catch up with that number either sometimes. So it can be, I know that when a lot of these bonds were taken out in the mid-teens, right? I don't know what bond rates were, but they were really freaking low. right? I know like 2010, 2012, they were like 1.5%.
I don't know if you can tell them quite that low, but there was a period where they were fairly low.
Yeah, I mean, we were doing as much construction as we could in the county that I worked, because it was like, I mean, it wasn't free money, but it was darn close compared to the rates of oil going up and mix going up and hourly wages and stuff, so, yeah, it's not an easy answer.
No, it's not, Mayor, but we have to find a balance that's
Yeah.
sustainable.
As an example for the, I mean, as I mentioned, the 2026, the first year is the year that you're giving direction to go forward with. So
Correct.
you're talking about that 10 million, we're already working on all those projects, so we would need to know very quickly if we're not supposed to be working on them. But they're basically spoken for. You got the stormwater pond is in a contract with Gagne, so you're gonna pay them when that's done. And that's the biggest bang for your buck you're getting. The water treatment plant is gonna be reimbursed by grant, and then you have the trunk highway 36 is a $2.5 million one, so that's your biggest one.
You can't back that one out.
So it's really
because
only
it's
your street
obligated.
project for 2026, pausing that is really the only, on the infrastructure projects, I'm not talking about parks or equipment
So
or
what happens
vehicles or
if we
things
do
like
that?
that, but
Yeah.
really, it's just the 2026 street improvement project
Yeah.
is the only one you could defer.
And if we defer it, then next year we have to defer that one as well, so everything gets pushed back here. So like, again, I want to be clear that I understand that. And if that's just a no-go, that's all right. If it's possible, I want to move in that direction though.
You know, I think it's important to point out that we talk about CIP being a long-range planning document, it's not etched in stone, and that, all that is true, except in 2025, we said, let's go ahead with the 2026 improvements. And so, you know, or we have, you know, like in the case of our fire truck, we moved it up. And so, and every time we talk about what was in the CIP. So we kind of play both sides of that CIP.
Well, but
You know, it's not etched in stone, but it
But I
was in
would-
the CIP.
I would also say that those weren't just because it was in the CIP. I think we had a fairly good discussion related
Yes.
about the future costs and waiting on that and how much that increased the cost of those
Yep.
vehicles by
Yes.
waiting to order, right? So it's not just because it was in the CIP, I
Understand.
don't feel, as it was stated, so,
Well,
I don't remember, what are the other roads in the 2026 street improvements? I know I've driven the ones at the,
Lake Elmo Heights.
Lake Elmo
That's
Heights.
the only neighborhood,
that's the only one,
yeah.
yeah. And, you know, if, I encourage council members to go take a look at that development. And if you think that can be pushed, then bring it forward. I certainly will not be, I've been on those roads and I would not concur with any delaying that project at all.
I mean, do you feel like within the next 2 years, we can get to a point where we're moving more in this direction of slowing down?
It will be. I mean, there are some roads like, just go drive it, I swear. You'll understand. There's that, roads like 38th and 39th off of Jamaica, that they're in disrepair. And not only are they gonna cost the city more the longer you wait, well, actually, those roads are just gonna cost because they were waited so long. And so we will be at full reconstruct on those. But I think when we get to some of the ones that are maybe, might have a little bit more of a question mark, that's when you get to say, let's push that, right? Cause you can.
And that's like in the 5 to 10 year window. It's not next year, it's
Well,
not the year.
Hudson Boulevard, we've pushed 2 years now
Yeah.
already. We've pushed them both. So
Yeah.
they've been in the closer windows and we've been pushing them back. Each year we keep looking at them. You watch the freeze thaw cycle over that winter when it's in that next year, and then you look at it right away in the spring. And if you can push it, we've pushed it.
So it's, and I mean, I guess when I'm looking at it, like the roads, the two that I mentioned, it's not just the roads themselves are really bad, but then, you know, our maintenance vehicles have to go try and plow that. Well, and you're tearing up roads and you're beating up your plows, you get your belly scrapers in there. It's not good if they're hitting manholes or whatever could be in the roadway at that point. So that there's potential costs. They're not saying that there is specifically, but like the, yeah, some of the frontage roads and stuff, when I drive them, seat of the pants, if it came up, I'm like, well, it's drains out to the ditch. It's fine. Doesn't need to be done, right? It's not a lot of resident traffic on it. It's, you know, there are gonna be those instances that come up. This next year, I don't believe is one of them.
I think no matter what, because this is a workshop, we're not making any decisions, but either way, between now and the end of the year, we also all, I think, have a responsibility to make sure we're communicating with the public about what the costs are. Because I think for years and years, that has not been done, which is why there is sticker shock when it increases, right? There's this expectation that taxes can be low and everything's hunky-dory. And that's simply not true. Things cost money, especially services that people expect. People expect police and fire. They expect roads that don't suck. They expect to have parks that are maintained, where trash are taken out, where they actually drain properly, where they have amenities. And these things cost money. So we're going to continue this conversation as to what the final percent will be, but I think we all have an obligation to make sure we're communicating, because there is city finances are a career in and of themselves that require higher levels of education and smart people to do it. And I think we all have an opportunity, because of what we see day to day, what we now are aware of. I think we have an opportunity to make sure that we're communicating that to the public to help ensure that everyone's on the same page as to what the costs are. Why does Chief need these additional people? Is to protect people's lives. Why are we investing in these roads? Because it saves money in the long term. It's those conversations I think we do need to have. But is there anything additional you need for this? I feel like we've given a lot of feedback, but I don't know if you've been informed we'd like to reduce costs, but we've also been clear as mud again.
You okay over there, Adam?
Stop laughing.
How do you really feel?
So to recap, I heard you say, look at the street projects over the next 5 years and see if you can stretch them to 7.
As an idea,
As
not because I agree with it, but as something we can come up with
Okay.
and see what does this look like, as one possible idea.
Yeah, just for direction for staff for the next time we meet. You mentioned something about the parks. And so I was just pulling up, we have this Parks Master Plan, which has
Yep.
recommendations, and obviously then the Parks Commission reviewed it and came forward with their recommendations. So you just mentioned it, but are you asking for us to relook at, like the park replacement or the shelter additions, or we need a little
I
direction?
think it's worth looking at if we want to reduce capital costs, to reduce levy and future debt, that we need to look across the board. You know, as it was said, things that are nice to have versus things that are needed, and maybe push the things that are nice to have, maybe space them out a little bit to make that less of a stark contrast to increases.
The playgrounds to me are that prime example.
So it seems to me that you'd probably kick it back to the Parks Commission with some direction, because probably don't want just Adam and Marty just deciding, right?
No.
I mean, we want to include them.
Or we-
They can make
They
the
have
right
the workshop
decisions,
coming up.
but
Don't we have a workshop with them?
Here you go.
we do. That wasn't exactly, that'll be a specific item. That wasn't,
Sure.
so we can have more specifics. So that's something that we would include at that workshop with them, the joint one.
Okay.
That's,
I think that's a big item.
I think the goal you hit on the head is, what can we do to minimize that? Understanding if those streets, if they're in that bad condition, we need to do them.
Yeah.
We don't wanna cuddle things that we need to do, but we have to find a way to massage this and get it to a little bit better number that is more financially sustainable.
Well, and I think if we can't do it through the CIP, then it goes back to the budget, and then it has to come out of there somewhere else then. And again, my goal is if we can decrease the capital expense levy, the $500,000 that we have in the budget, if we could decrease that to 300,000 or 250,000, if we could decrease the parks levy to 50,000 or 25,000, those are some big chunks taken out to get to that $1 million less in the budget.
So just a question, just trying to understand. So you indicated, what was the percentage increase this year? It was 20%, was that it?
So the tax amount was 21%
Okay.
increase, the amount
And-
taxed,
And so,
or the,
and this is just
levy.
so you said I'd be more comfortable at 10%.
Which would,
So I'm just wondering how you get to, what makes you feel comfortable at 10%? What makes that decision, I guess?
I'll
Is
be
it
quite
just
honest,
a
I'd
number?
feel more comfortable with the 3% of a
Right.
tax rate increase, which
Right.
would be closer to, you know, that'd be increasing our tax base by even more than, it'd be less than a 10% increase
Right.
in the
Sure, yeah.
the tax levy. I feel like I'm trying, maybe this is the bad approach to try to meet in the middle, but I'm trying to balance, yes, I understand that we're a growing city, I understand that maybe we've undertaxed in the past and we have to do some catch-up for that. I have a really hard time stomaching a 20% increase, knowing that we're also probably gonna have to do that again next year, and it's gonna keep on going in that direction. I'd rather more gradually work there. There isn't an exact science where it's gonna get us to a specific dollar with the 10%.
So when we do that gradual, and Director Hadler, you can correct me on this, so if we do the more gradual, then that takes us longer at reducing the debt, which is what your hot button seems
Not
to
if
be,
we
right?
decrease the
I think we have the franchise fee, and if we have a $250,000, I'll just pick up a number, right? Infrastructure
Yeah.
levy, we can take 500,000 off of debt for the 2026 roads, you know, because we have that $500,000 in those funds. We have the levy and the franchise fee. So we can reduce that, which will help, and maybe next year we can get the infrastructure levy, you know, up another 100,000. And so I think we kind of work our way, we're not gonna get there as fast as we'd like to, but we do have a plan. And maybe in 2027, we can raise it even more. We don't know enough about it. I just think that, I'm with Counselor, I think 21% is a real hard pill to swallow.
It's a big number, don't disagree. So then, when you said don't look at the CIP, but I think the CIP works in concert with the budget to a degree. So I don't think you can look at one without, you can't look at the budget, I think, without looking at the CIP.
Yes.
Or I was saying, if we can't change the CIP for 2026, if it's just, hey, there's nothing to be moved there, everything's on contract, and
Then there's not much moving in the budget unless you're looking at those, what I would call nickel and dime line items.
COLA.
So,
We
so if
decrease the
you,
capital
if you
expenses,
go COLA
levies.
from a 3 to a 2.7, which I think is fair, and, you know, you're talking, again, smidgens.
Well, then
That's not gonna get you to that
take the
number.
500,000 down to 250,000, take the parks
could-
of 100
you could-
down to
Yeah,
10,000.
so then it's just a question of, would you lengthen that time to try and play catch-up to where you have the money to pay cash for things, right?
I just don't know how much it would lengthen it, because if we look at it, if we also look at the CIP at the same time and say we can't spend $5 million per year on, or $11 million on public works per year over the next 10 years, we have to decrease that. If we can decrease that amount, we're not accruing as much debt.
Yeah.
We're increasing revenues, so we're going from both ends, right? Yes, if we didn't decrease expenses, it's gonna take longer.
Yeah.
But if we increase revenues, not as much as was shown in the budget, but we also decrease the expenses, yes, from the budget if possible, but also looking at the CIP and saying, okay, we can't spend this much, we have to decrease that somehow, and roads are a really big portion of that every single year and with the debt, and so is that the easiest place to go? maybe, but maybe not, right? Maybe it has to be somewhere else. Maybe it's the parks and the playgrounds, but it needs to happen from both
Well,
ends.
it could be fleet, it could be a lot of things.
100%.
I think you look at, first you look at some of those, one-time expenditures that are in the budget. Can we postpone them or put them off? Do we really need to have that one-time expenditure? I think the thing we talked about, the firefighters and the public works staff, I think we need to do those things because that's the core of our operation.
Yeah.
But if we can take a look in capital's a one-time expenditure. So we take a look at those one-time expenditures, and if there's some increase in operations that we say, well, can we trim this a little bit or do it? It's not an easy task, I don't disagree, but I think there's a way to get it down, and ten's a okay number, maybe 12. I think 21's a little more than we should bite, but I don't wanna make stupid decisions either. And my thought was, the staff knows us better than we do, we can give guidance, and I can look line by line and say, what about this, what about this, what about this? But if we have five people doing it, all we're gonna do is inundate the staff with what about this and what about that questions.
Right.
And so, my thinking was, they're smart people, and, what can we do, what would you suggest we could do to bring this down to something more palatable?
So that would be my suggestion, to be looking at the goals, because we don't know which goals you want us to slow down on. And we can, and I know it's long, but I don't think it would take that long as a group of staff if we went by goals and we could kind of blurt out what we've included in our budgets working on this goal. And then, just so you know, and they could say, no, let's not do that this year.
Right,
I mean, a lot of it's contract services, to be honest with you, we're,
right.
so,
Pull it up.
okay.
It's on the screen. How do I get it up there?
That's a good question.
I'm gonna ask for a point of privilege for a restroom and water refill. 5 minutes, okay?
Yeah.
While you guys are figuring that out.
Get hold of yourself there.
Oh, I want water.
I will.
Do we have to close out of the presentation?
Oh, it should just be showing whatever's on the screen, which is not.
That was purely selfish.
Does this thing do something?
Everyone was thinking
You know
it.
what? It's maybe
the playground conversation, I think, is more for the parks
Yeah.
council meeting of like, well, what do we want to prioritize with that money? Is probably, but that's a good point that, like, again, that's not gonna be something that's gonna really change the budget or the levy amount or how much debt we're accruing in the short term, potentially in the future, because it's more parks.
Okay. Okay, so the first one, develop the master plans, including community engagement for the 77 acres and the existing 180 acres. I'll say, for the community engagement for the 77 acres, I did get a price from that National Community Survey. We've talked a lot about doing statistically sound survey when we get to the point of having something to ask the community about, and so that is that, since I'm not there, I don't have the exact number, but it's like between 20 and 30,000.
Okay.
So if you wanted to slow down and say, let's slow down on this process and not think about doing a survey, we can push that away. But also, go ahead.
To clarify,
Yeah.
a statistically significant survey for the 180, not for the ball fields.
No, this is for the ball fields.
Okay,
But it's a whole survey to get, a statistically sound survey that talks about 10 facets of livability. So you get a whole bunch of other information, and then we would customize questions
Gotcha.
specific to the 77.
so multitasking.
Correct. But I know that in community development's budget, they have a lot of stuff for contract services, for planning for this. And I have to have Jason help me for what about approximately for the 77 acres and the 180 that we should expect for next year.
Right, so we have budgeted 60,000 for the ball fields, and that's going through the entire planning process in 2026. We've talked to a couple of people, if we want to do the full financial study, which is going to be important in terms of what type of revenue you can generate and what do you want to replace, and we're going to talk about this more in September, but a lot of the associations are talking about artificial turf and these sorts of things. That group will come in, it costs about $50,000, but they'll put together a full plan study, financial feasibility, and get it ready for a referendum if you do want to bring it to a referendum. Also, community engagement. So that's budgeted right now. So the question is just, do you want to stay on track for that? Because I think the next referendum is 2026, and if we miss that one, it's 2028, I believe, so.
Right.
And then what about the 180 acres?
Well, that one's going forward, that one is a lot less. That's just 30,000 for appraisals and all the pre-development to get that ready. As you know, we budgeted some this year, but we have a grant to cover half of it, so,
Okay,
That's the ULI
yes.
component.
all right. Number 2, I don't think we really had any specific items, but number 3, the comprehensive financial strategy and the multiple long-term goals. That is our next item on the agenda, but Clarissa can maybe, you might as well just speak to that now if it's okay.
Yep, and Councilmember Dragisich had pointed out, and I had kind of forgotten that was in my budget this year. So I budgeted 50 to be safe, but in discussions with consultants and staff, we think that we can do that internally and get it down to closer to 10.
Okay.
Number 4, the future MUSA, well, we all know that we're embarking on a 3-year program starting right now where we're gonna need contract services to help us get us ready for the comprehensive plan. So Jason, do you have kind of a ballpark on what you
So
planned on?
total, it's about 125. I've talked to a couple other cities, they're around that too, so.
We can't just tell Met Council to go take a hike. I'm joking.
For the whole 3-year process, 125?
125, 150, but right now we're at 125. But what I'm hearing from other cities is around 150 max.
Okay.
Communications, we didn't have anything specific to that. Develop old fire station site. Can you talk about,
I mean, we're doing well. We've received proposals today. Today was the deadline. We're going through them, so we're moving forward. One of the things we talked about is if there's any kind of business incentive going through that process. So hopefully we'll close in February, just in case it gets dragged out a little bit with environmentals and
Sure.
business subsidy.
There's no real expenses in the 2026 budget relative to that, though,
They're
correct?
minor, we budgeted for environmental, and we received a grant for the full environmental costs.
Okay.
And then, we should have everything done by this year in terms of, we do need to get an appraisal.
But nothing in the 2026 budget
Hopefully
shown
it'll-
tonight was,
Yes, hopefully
Budgeted.
it'll be done by 2026.
Chief, for number 7, did you have anything planned for this?
Yeah,
for
in
next year?
2026 budget, we had a GIS response or location study for a potential cell station. That was $13,000. We could definitely defer that as long as we feel like we need to, and we could start having conversations. I don't think, if you look at available land in the south end of town of where you could pin a new station, the hypothetical station, there's really only a handful that truly makes sense just by looking at a map. I don't know if, necessarily a study's gonna tell us a whole lot other difference in that, other
Right.
than give us the actual data to say, this is what response times look like, this is what things look like. I think that's definitely a cost we could defer or look at.
Do you
down the road.
remember, like, about how much that was?
That was 13,000.
Oh,
13,000.
that's fine, okay. Okay. All right, number 8, so that's, kind of the next item as well. One of your goals was to analyze and assess water, sewer, and streetlight fees. So the streetlight fees internally, we've started working on, as staff has more time, we'll pick that back up. It's not anytime soon, but, been collecting data from other cities, how they do it, so forth. But, for the other studies, we did have, Clarissa's worked a lot with Nate, our engineer, about this, so I guess, if you want to add anything else.
Similar to the last discussion, so we had initially tentatively budgeted $50,000 as we were pulling together data, and we would decrease that to $25,000. That would be split between the water and sewer funds.
Okay.
So would not affect the levy, by the way.
sorry, say that again?
That would not affect the levy, because it's coming out of the water and sewer funds.
Got it.
All right, I'm gonna need some help on this next one. The staffing appropriate for desired service levels. Thank you. So, that's clearly where we're coming from with our captain ask.
Yeah,
And then, in the admin budget, and again, the email that I sent you all about looking at the public works wages and market adjustments, as well as looking at the entire staff as well. So I did, I think I put in there about $30,000. Now we're getting quotes from consultants to do that, and they're coming in a lot less. We're not looking at throwing away the study that was done by Baker Tilly, but kind of,
as is,
like revamping it.
back in the
and-
day, I don't know that they were very helpful.
What was that?
I'm just kidding, I'm jabbing
Well, I
Councilmember
did reach out to
Dragisich.
them for a little refresh, and I have not heard back.
Okay,
I don't know, are they still in that line of business? Maybe Councilmember.
Maybe a
Dragisich.
refund.
Do you know, do they still do the class and compensation?
My knowledge, they do. They got out of the executive search, I know, recently.
Yeah.
But they're paying class stuff. It's actually headed up out of Texas. I can touch base with someone there if you need a hand.
Well, so I did reach out twice to see if we could work with them for a little customer service, a little refresh of it, but I haven't heard back. So,
Okay.
but otherwise, we've been researching and having meetings with other companies that do it, and it's, so far, they're coming in a lot less than that 30,000, right? Is
Okay.
to work with what we have now, instead of just redoing it all. So that's that. Do we didn't say anything about number 10 on the slides? No, I don't think so. Number 11, yeah, I guess, thank you. Start development process for 180-acre parcel, that we already talked about that. Improve GIS mapping, as part of switching to Bolton and Mink this year, we are getting GIS, but staff will have to help me if there's any other additional costs that they had in their budget for something additional with GIS. Do you guys know?
That was part of the WAC and SAC fee study, was going to be having them review sort of some of the fixed asset stuff, so there might be a little bit, but that would be related to that other.
Okay.
We did have a don't quote me, $4,000 for the Beehive asset for Parks Layer.
Yep.
That does incorporate GIS as far as assets and management and work orders.
Yep. Okay. Explore and develop plan for future of Old City Hall. I don't believe there's anything in this budget that's, we're gonna have a workshop this year still about that in October, I believe it is, so.
didn't see anything in the budget for that.
And then adopt the CIP to include deferred maintenance on city buildings, and Clarissa talked about that a lot with our buildings, so. Hopefully that was a little helpful. If you have any other questions, I guess.
Was someone gonna say something? I thought-
No, go ahead.
I mean, I guess my first thought after hearing that is, I wish I would have wrote all those numbers down that we said, because the total is probably under $500,000. So maybe the question is, which of these do we need to focus on? Well, okay, if we're spending $500,000 of 12 million on these goals, well, what about the other 11.5 million? Like, maybe that is actually what it needs to be focused on for where we're looking to cut. I mean, if this is $500,000 of the budget on our top priorities, can we look elsewhere?
Well, we have, we start with operations as of today to continue all the services we're providing and what that will cost us next year. So that was our base. And then we add on things to achieve your goals. So I don't know where else, we need specific direction on where.
So if this was 500,000, and I think I'm being conservative on that, I don't think the numbers that you gave as we were going through these was even totaling $500,000. Where's the $2 million increase? Where's the other $1.5 million coming from? Of increase from 2025 to 2026?
Well, 600,000 roughly for personnel. Let me actually,
You wanna-
trying to remember where I had like three different computers going.
Was it in your memo, or?
So it's page 5 of my memo has a table with the personnel changes. So if you wanted to refer to your packets in my memo, on page 5, there's a, sorry, you're way down at the
Oh,
bottom here.
okay.
Why is the page number not coming up down at the bottom? That's bizarre. There you are. So changes in the expense categories. So you've got just over 600,000 in personnel, so that includes that 3% COLA, step increases, and the additional staff.
So that's a large.
And I wouldn't be able to break it out as far as, what's what. I don't remember, do you know off the top of your head, Dustin, how much your captains were for the first year?
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but the range is 90 to 121. So I don't know what that equates to with when we add in benefits.
I mean, and that's for the total for the year. If I had to guess, roughly a third.
It goes
Of
from
each, right?
687 for this year to 901 next year, so roughly 14,000 for half a year, right?
Yeah, because they're 6 months.
Yep.
Right. So materials and supplies, jumped up, so part of that's IT, so we've got computer replacements, so we could certainly look at that, but that's a 23,000. Charges and services, a lot of contract services in there, so, all of our consultants, so a lot of these studies that we were talking about come right out of there, so that $350,000 change, most of it is some of these goal
And I think,
stuff,
just
right?
like when you guys were going through the goals, there was, at least the ones I caught, 53,000 of it, where you, just during that discussion, you said, yep, we can cut
We can cut
that
that, yep.
immediately.
Yep.
Okay, so there's 53.
And then contingency, we never use this. I literally just use it as often a balancing thing. One other thing I need to work into the long-term plan. Some of the things like not budgeting as high for interest and some of the contingency, we need to make sure that we maintain that general fund policy so that 50 to 60%, we're well over that right now. But in the future, we just need to kind of maintain.
Here?
Yes, Councilmember
I have
Tracy.
another thought how we can get that 12%, 21% down, and still accomplish some of these things. And maybe for some of these one-time expenditures that we think we really need would benefit for us, take it from fund balance. We have $12 million in general fund balance. If we were to take 500,000 from there for some of these one-time expenditures, we could reduce that impact considerably, along with some of the other changes we've talked about, and still get those things done. Even if we had to take $1 million, we're talking about 8% of $12 million. It's not a huge thing, but it will allow us to get the necessary things done and not raise taxes 21%.
We could use some cash funds that we have. Sometimes that, you would know better than me how that affects your rating, right?
Okay.
Well, you know, we have more than a year's of expenditures in our general fund cash. So we have very, very well funded. I know that, it's been over a year since I read the Moody's comment, but they comment on our level of cash. But I don't know that would necessarily drag us down a lower rating. It's, because there's a lot of other
Weren't we
factors that
over
weigh
like a-
into it.
Yeah.
I don't think that's, I understand that that could be a solution for this year, but I think it puts us in the same situation for next year. I think this goes back to, I mean, you even said it, we're maintaining what we spent last year, and then we're gonna add to that. And that's what happens every single year. If we add, we don't take away.
But Matt,
And
it's talking
so-
about one-time expenditures, not ongoing. These
We
are-
didn't decrease our expenses at all, so we're gonna be in the same situation next year.
Well, no, he's saying so that you're like your contract services that you're paying.
But
the
our
one
budget
time.
for this year is 12 million,
No,
if it
but that-
passes.
But it's still adding in, the contract services are added into that. Those are the one-time expenses.
The one-time contract
But if
for
our
something that
budget-
A
comes
one-time
up.
contract, not the ongoing contract, one time. Our financial plan, long-range financial plan.
Yeah.
Maybe, some of the things we talked about doing, like the survey. Another one would be, what else we have in there? The compensation plan. Those are kind of one-time things that we maybe do every 3 to 5 years, and we would pay for those with fund balance to reduce the levy amount.
But that doesn't change our budget for this year.
Yeah, it does.
And the
does.
budget,
Yes, it
Yes,
does.
it does.
It doesn't change the budget, it's change the source of revenue.
so we're
Right.
still budgeting to spend that much money.
Right, but you don't have to put it on a levy.
You're both right.
Yeah.
The expenses are still happening.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't show on the P and L sheet, it wouldn't show as we're spending a total of
Yeah.
$12 million.
Right, it would be a revenue, from your fund to put in that would balance out the expenditure. So then your total levy need would be less.
It's a very good use of fund balance, because you're doing one
Sure.
time.
For things that are not ongoing, for things that come up.
Yeah.
I think the comp plan
Could be something
stuff
like
is a
that,
prime
yeah.
example for that, because
Yeah.
no one, I'm not gonna continue that sentence. It is a great way to use it for something that is required of us.
Yep.
Or the services for potentially the ball fields. I think that'd be another thing, because that's a generational act. Like, that is gonna last far
40-year
longer. Yes.
40-year act.
To me, that is something where, number one, that fund balance is, it's not just healthy, it's beyond healthy. It's
I like
like Whole
that.
Foods healthy.
I like
And-
that idea.
And again, you already discussed that multiple of these contracts might end up being less. I do not want to ever use fund balance for ongoing costs, because that is a terrible idea.
Terrible
But
idea.
for these and only because it is so healthy, for some of these one-time costs that are not ongoing, I am fine with that.
Say for the 180 acres, some of those one-time things that have long-term implications for us.
Right.
Getting that 180 acres developed will bring big returns for us in terms of amount of of taxes.
It'll more than pay for itself.
Yeah, and so if, and again, I would think that, you know, Clarissa would talk with our bond people and say, we don't want to do something stupid either. Tammy, what could we take 500,000 out of there and not take a ding in our credit rating? I mean, we need to be careful about that. But if, again, it's part of, how do you balance it all out in a way that makes sense and gets us where we need to be, and keeps the increase in taxes a little bit less than what we're talking about?
Okay, and just to make sure I'm understanding this, so the example give one example of one of the one-time,
Comp plan,
so in what, 100, was it
150,000?
125.
125,000. So if we pay for that with the general fund,
No,
Balance.
with,
the general,
with.
The bank
with our-
account.
With our
the bank account,
Yeah.
it still is gonna show
As
in
an
our budget as
expenditure.
an expense
Yes.
under administration.
Yep.
And so when we come
No,
to
under
the budget,
planning and zoning, or community development, I mean.
okay, and it's gonna show there under
Yep.
that department.
Yep.
And then when we get to setting the budget for 2027,
Yep.
it's gonna show that there was this expense there and
Yep.
that this much was spent by that department.
Yep.
And I can't, other than the mayor and city council's department going down this year, they don't go down.
But that expenditure wouldn't, he wouldn't include it again next year in his
Yeah, it wouldn't
budget,
be in
because
the
it's
27
not
budget.
ongoing expense, it's a one-time.
I mean, technically, we're
But
talking
there's
about
been
it.
more ongoing, there's been the single expenses every year that we've done this, but it's never gone down the next year as a result of that.
The comp plan, if we do the comp plan,
Comp plan
and it's
for
$100
once every 10
$125,000, we get to 2027, he's not gonna need the comp plan. So $125,000 will not show up in 2027. Granted, his other expenses may go up, but that $125,000
That's my
won't be in
concern,
there.
is usually when there's a certain amount budgeted, you find a way to spend that much, again, the next year, because we spent that much the year before. And that's, I mean, when you look at the budget, like, that's what's happened. We don't see numbers go down ever, they keep going up.
I mean, I could see it, I think of it as you are correct, and I see it happen a lot, especially in my job, where the difference is someone's job paid with a grant, or is it paid with state funds? And that's a very hard balance, because there are certain things where there's an expectation of this money's gonna continue. Always paid with a temporary grant, and then we run into issues, which is why I hate using grants for ongoing
Well, that's
costs.
an ongoing cost.
But in this case, and to clarify, when that time does come, do we pay upfront for all 3 years? And so it is only in this year? Or is it gonna be like 40,000 a year for 3 years?
We should be paying a little bit this year,
It's
next year, and then.
Based on
2027.
percentage of completion, right?
So for this example, it technically is not a single, but it's a 3-year thing. But the survey is another one where it's a one-time thing. There will not be, hey, let's do a repeat of it every year. Like, that's not happening.
I don't think that Nicole and Clarissa are gonna say, well, you spent $1 million last year, we're gonna spend $1,300,000 this year, because you don't need a 3%. They go through line by line when they're doing this and say, do you really need that? What's the purpose of it? You know, I don't know any cities that just say, well, we spent, the biggest problem I remember seeing is there'd be budget, and we get to the end of the year, and department doesn't wanna spend that budget down, because they're afraid they won't get the same amount next year. My view is always, I don't care what you got last year, you have to justify what you need next year to me and to the city council, because that's the way the world should work. You get the money you need to operate your department, and that'll vary year to year. And often you'll see budgets will be less because there'll be a big capital item. You know, the fire truck, the chief's gonna have, what, $1.5 million in a fire truck. Well, the following year, he's not going to have that $1.5 million in his budget. It's gonna come down.
You'd hope so. And I think psychologically, that's hard to do, though. I think,
I don't think so at all.
The thing that will be in the budget next year is when you hire somebody and you start running that service, that will reoccur, right? That's an ongoing expense.
so if that's the solution for getting it down to 10%, great. I'd hate for that to be the only avenue taken versus all these other discussions we've had of
Oh, yeah.
really looking through. and-
It won't be the
I mean,
only.
that
Well,
can't be-
It won't be the only avenue, it's just another avenue that allows us to get some of these one-time things that we should do logically done
Yeah.
without increasing the levy to accomplish them.
And if we can get there without it, then we should do that first.
Yeah, if we can, but I'm thinking that's gonna be real
Well,
difficult.
did you see any of the strategic goals that we identified in February that you wanted to push back, cause I didn't find anything.
But I mean, I guess my point again is as they were going through those, that wasn't that much of the budget. It was a very
Right.
minimal amount.
But a lot of those were one-time costs in there for studies.
Yeah.
And things like that, right?
Yeah.
And some of those things you need to do to carry on the business of your city, making sure that your employees are taken care of appropriately so that they don't abscond off to some city that's gonna, you know, hope that the grass is greener on the other side of the fence.
I mean, like, if we go back to them, I think there's only a few of them that we truly can actually say we can't go for. The Met Council one, we're kind of,
We're
we
not
can't
doing
do
it.
anything there.
Not
obviously,
gonna do
right?
it.
I mean, obviously, the number one, the first one on there is one that can be adjusted. The two were brought up right away, from the financial, the 40,000 decrease from chief with the 13,000. I can't remember the specific item that it was, but. I mean,
GPS location
And there was some
study
talk
for the
about
fire hall.
And so there was maybe $75,000 of items on there that, how much was it for item number one that you were saying we're gonna be spending for the plan for the ball fields and the 177 acres?
So that next year's
For 100.
budgeted about 90,000.
I mean, maybe that's it. I mean, I don't know where else to,
The other thing I'd point out that things like in the comp plan where we have a utility component, we could take some from our utility fund balance, a proportion of the comp plan from those funds. So it's a matter of just being smart, because we're gonna be projecting the future of our parks and our utilities and our transportation. And so we have funds that are self-sustaining like water, sewer, stormwater. We can take a portion of those costs from those fund balance, those cash balances in those funds. And so it's stepping back and saying, can we be as smart as we can be to accomplish these goals? And for these one-time, take them from some of our available cash, and that way we can, you know, drive that levy we need down as far as we can. And cut out some things we just don't need. It's a combination of all those, but it occurred to me, you know, that we did have some cash on hand that we could use to do, and I would only support cash for one-time expenditures.
Right.
and again, I still go back to the levies for the capital plant, the parks. Let's cut those down. Let's decrease the CIP so we can still achieve the goal of in 20 years or 30 years, 20 years getting to that $30 million debt, because we're going from both directions, not just increasing revenue.
So one
There's-
asterisk, because Clarissa mentioned this too, part of that park levy is to build it up to pay for things that we already have that are depreciating.
Like the playgrounds?
Playgrounds are one example, but it's the entire system. And we're gonna have a conversation next, in September. I think many of us are in agreement that we're gonna need to have a very quality conversation about future cost. But it's not just for new future items, it's also for the entire system that already exists. And we are playing catch-up with it because, I mean, the reason I support it is because development is slowing down and we had to have a new source of revenue to make up for development slowing down. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a parks levy.
Right.
We wouldn't have a parks fund to begin with without that levy. There's gonna be a time when development is not adding anything to it, and then we are in a very bad situation.
Well, not if we put money into the levy
Okay.
or the fund.
All right, so we have a couple things we've discussed. Five-year roads into 7, what does that look like? Are there a couple of one-time things that we could use cash for in a very limited and specific way? Are there other are there other very specific and purposeful ways to help hone this? And it's a 19% increase, it's not a 21% increase.
I think it was 21.
For the rate, you don't use the rate.
The rate?
The rate is,
18%.
but the rate itself is meaningless because it's based upon your,
That's not what the actual dollars spent.
yes, the actual dollar spent is 19 for,
Right here, memo said 21.
21.
for the impact to a homeowner.
Oh, I'm talking about just the total dollars spent.
Oh, all right. Well, we're talking the same thing. Yeah, it's 19% for the typical homeowner. So what are the other ways we can reduce that?
Okay, great.
Okay. Do you need to talk about the strategic financial management plan anymore? Do you have any questions about any of those documents? We've kind of talked about them all already, the different studies.
Right. Okay.
Good.
Well,
Okay.
we're just a little
Sorry, what?
beyond our schedule in the agenda.
What was the last?
I was asked them if they want to talk any more about the strategic planning, the fee studies, or the other
I'll
study.
take a look at paying the one-time costs with,
My question would be, are we on board with what I described and I can,
Yeah.
yes.
awesome.
Yep.
All right, last item on the agenda for this evening. City Center wall art.
Here we go. So we have the city center and there's blank walls. And so there are blank walls with some lights to highlight artwork or something that's not there. So I just threw this up as a discussion item because I'm curious, what's our plan? And so I had worked with architect from Leo Daly as well as an art lady to kind of talk about the common areas and what could be, and just to kind of throw it out there to council to give you some ideas and to see just any input on where we go from here.
I love that this is a topic, here is necessary. My first initial thoughts, historical society stuff, I find to be great. My personal perspective is I think most residents, when they come in here, would think to see that type of stuff, the history of Lake Elmo, the prime examples of gathering spaces, of current parks, of history, of prior individuals. So I think the opportunities that exist through the Historical Society and finding those, enlarging and framing, fantastic. Especially given the cost, some of the paintings, not my cup of tea. Especially given the photos and blowing those up would be vastly cheaper. Maybe there's an opportunity for yearly artwork from schools. I don't know what that would consist of, but here's this year's winners for paintings of the year for the fifth graders who are graduating at our elementary in the district, that type of thing. I think there are many. I don't want to. My personal thing is not to have too much where it's everywhere, but it's lacking. So I would go down the historical route myself, and I think this would be a prime example of some of the budgeted for 25. I think this is a prime example to use from the fund. It's a one-time thing for the People's Hall within the People's Building. I don't, but wait, this is already in the 25 budget, so it's already there, it already exists.
No, we have it tentatively scheduled in the 26 budget
Oh, yeah.
as a CIP item
Right.
for 25,000.
Okay. I like the idea of some local artists, but I thought I saw something where one of the walls you could, like the Da Vinci Art Fest, they get some winners or give them an opportunity to,
Yeah, so we did.
did I
mean,
see something
Yep,
in there?
yep, so it's actually the lobby mezzanine, that wall, that's where we decided we could get, well, not decide, an option of just, like cable, and then
Yeah.
you can change out, like, it wouldn't be sculptures, I think it would be
Right.
flat art. And so that can be a direction. Do you want us to look at what a community art program would be, but it was just for that wall upstairs?
Yeah.
I mean, that to me would be an opportunity that everyone's artwork is due by National Night Out, and it's all posted on National Night Out, and people come and vote. And that painting then is hung up there for the next year.
I think we should have a statue of the mayor, chiseled in granite, and put it right in the center of the lobby.
The first mayor,
No, the current mayor.
it wouldn't take up that much,
Do we do the
that'd be
thinking
a short
pose?
statue.
Hey. That sounded like a cut. Yeah, I like the idea of the historical stuff, and I like the idea of, using local artists. I know there are quite a few artists in the area that sometimes it's a photo, sometimes it's a painting, that they're really pretty cool. We have an employee that does some pretty cool art, right?
We might
So,
have some photographers as well.
yeah, we do. I don't know who they are over that way.
I
Someone.
haven't talked to the set employees.
Okay. All right.
Maybe
So,
they
I
are
mean,
retired from that.
I mean, I don't think we gotta spend the big money on the art that may come and go as, you know, that you're gonna see someplace else necessarily.
Agreed.
I don't think we should, maybe it's the backdrop of the conversation tonight, but, you know, if we're looking at items for the 2026 CIP, that can be pushed back a year. In my mind, this is it, even though I think it's a great idea, and I think if we're gonna go forward with it, I think there's a lot of great opportunities to get art in here from the community at no cost. So, yeah.
I would push for the historical things, just to have some on the walls, for people when they come in.
So one caveat for the real historical society photos,
Yeah.
you can imagine the quality. So they can't be blown up too big. And so there was some displays on what it would be like. And so, we pictured the walls in here would be where we would display the historical society pictures. But what I'm hearing you say is, on the other areas, perhaps, you're not into the artwork stuff, but like real pictures of Lake Elmo.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like old, it could be of just some sort of abstract.
It could be a sunset of Lake Elmo.
Right.
It could
Okay.
be, Green Acres sledding during the winter with kids smiling.
And then obviously a community art program. I
Yeah.
don't know that I haven't researched the programs, but I wasn't envisioning that would be on every wall,
Yeah,
right?
right.
It's like a
No, I-
designated area.
I concur. I don't know how others feel, but yeah, it doesn't have to be on every wall.
No.
Agreed.
does not have to be, no.
Less can be more.
I agree.
Okay?
You agree with moving forward, keeping it in the plan for this next year?
Yes.
Yeah, and just add that into the one time, as far as I'm concerned, because those will be there for a long time. It's history of Lake Elmo. I was a little, when that came on the first time we discussed that, I was a little surprised that that wasn't in the, or that got spent out of the budget when the building was done, because I'm certain that was talked about when the building stuff was coming up. So, that's disappointing.
And prior to doing anything, bring back real costs and real ideas to you, obviously.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
All right.
No, we didn't talk about the stormwater fees, but let's do that another night.
Yeah, we're not gonna talk about that tonight,
It's on the
Councilmember
agenda.
Dragisich.
Um,
Well,
It was on the agenda.
Yep, so, city engineer Nate,
Oh.
provided a memo about it.
oh yeah, it is on there,
So,
under the
Let's delay
strategic
it till another
management.
night. We've been
plan.
here long enough.
okay.
Well, I think we should stay here till midnight.
Okay, I have one more question since we're all here, for the 100th, anniversary celebration. We're moving forward with all of your guys' help, securing vendors, so we're doing good on the food trucks. Sounds like we got a band, maybe.
We got a band.
Yep, and so, some ideas that have been brought up to add potentially, inflatables or any sort of city swag. So I just wanted to throw that out there to
As-
see how you feel. I know we have the $50,000 cap,
Yeah.
so, so how do you feel about that?
Ask businesses would sponsor that.
What day?
I mean, they sponsored it for
Can you take that
National Night
on?
Out. I can take that on for sure. I think
Alright.
I think it'd just be reaching out to Connect Lake Elmo and having them send an email to everybody that was there for National Night Out. I mean, that's the group of businesses, and I think they had 2 bouncy houses this year, and
Yep.
you give them the opportunity to
Who
put their
took on
banner
the
up.
insurance for that?
I'm not sure. Is that covered
There, you know what, there's a
underneath our
large,
insurance?
you pay a larger fee when
I
you
did,
rent them.
just reach out to insurance today and he's gonna check on it, so I don't know. But I
Okay.
I
don't
know
know
when
about
we,
that.
cause I remember one year we were looking at doing that and they charge a lot higher fee when you're doing it when as a public event. The fee's a lot high. That might not be the insurance part of it, but.
'Cause I've rented large bouncy houses myself, and obviously they're popular, and there are multiple cities that do it for events, I've seen it before. I support it as long as it fits in the location, like.
Yeah, I think if people come down with families and stuff, something to give the kids to bounce around in, I guess, I thought would be, actually, I didn't think of it, somebody else, I was talking to them about it. They said, oh, you're gonna have bouncy houses? I'm like, didn't think about that, that's a great idea.
There's a diversity of bouncy houses. There are ones that just kids, you can just see the kids are standing like, this one's dumb.
Yeah,
And there are other ones where they love. So
Yeah.
I would definitely recommend not asking us.
we'll let the businesses
Ask kids.
figure it out.
You said you were looking to get two of, did I hear that?
Yeah, a couple,
Oh,
I
I
don't know
don't
what the
know.
right number is.
Yeah. I don't have, just throwing out there, and then the other idea was any sort of city swag, like we don't really have, obviously, at Lake Elmo Night Out, we had our, compostable bags, but that was paid for by a recycling grant. So, but just, I don't know, if there's any,
T-shirt.
yeah, anything,
Well, I know that some people will be selling T-shirts and stuff like that. I don't know that the city needs to bear the expense of, I mean, we're already providing the dance and, the area location and the fireworks, so I think we can, so I
think-
go to a lot of conferences and I get the swag and then it ends up in some drawer, so, I guess that's where I'm coming from.
I think to defer the cost, we should have a dance with the mayor for $10. You get a ticket for $10, you get to dance with the mayor.
My wife won't be there, so you'll be at net zero.
I say, can it run a deficit?
Yeah. I'll have to pay them not to dance with them.
okay, so no to any stuff.
Yeah, I can't see where that's a benefit we're already providing. I think we do need to get some, I don't know, we need to get some signs out, maybe around town or something like that, but
Yeah, we will definitely push our communications. We just wanted to get
Yep.
stuff settled. I didn't wanna say, we're gonna have vendors and a band, and then we don't.
right,
So,
no,
but now
we've got a band.
Do we have hard numbers from where we're at for the $50,000 budget?
Who's the band?
I actually just, we're still waiting on a number for a stage or confirmation of that. But we're well under that.
Well under,
Yeah.
okay, cool.
What kind
Tight
of?
fit,
Tight fit?
yeah.
I don't know them, but I was just wondering.
I mean, no, I'm good.
All right, gonna adjourn tonight's meeting at 9:30 PM. Thank you, everybody. Good discussion.
So the high school for homecoming.
That's it.